Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special meeting of the Brant County Council. Attendance has been taken. We're all here. Anything to add to the agenda? Councillor Miller?
Yeah, can I add one item at the end, Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Any other additions? Seeing none, Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kyle, that the County of Brant Special Council agenda for November 29th, 2022 be approved.
Noting the addition, all those in favor? Opposed and carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have any? Thank you. Delegations. Our first delegation, 4.1. Councillor Bell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Oakley, that section 10.d of the procedural bylaw be suspended to extend the presentation time past 10 minutes.
I think she's going to need 12 minutes, do you, Councillor Bell?
I can run a book on it if you want, but no, I don't.
Thank you. All those in favor? Extension? Opposed? Thank you. Councillor McAlpine. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. If you'd like to introduce the delegation, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Debbie Wilcox is an award-winning and nationally known speaker on municipal governance. As a CEO and founder of Meeting Solutions Group, she's worked with municipal clients from all over North America on governance, council staff relations, and meeting management. Debbie has over 30 years of public sector experience, is a professional registered parliamentarian, and holds a Master of Public Administration, Executive Masters in Municipal Management, along with the CMO designation. Debbie is a certified leadership coach and is the author of Breaking Glass, the Leadership Kit, a creative personal leadership development planner for women who lead.
Welcome.
Thank you. Would you like me to start, Mayor Bailey?
I would love you to start.
Okay.
Thank you.
All good?
All's good.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for having me. I've been doing a number of these throughout the province. I love talking about meeting mastery. As Alicia said, I was in local government for over 35 years. I retired about 5 years ago. I was the Director of Legislative Services for the region of Durham. So I do sessions on parliamentary procedure, and then I'll go through this session, and then there's lots of opportunity for you to ask questions. I've gone through your bylaw, so hopefully I've got everything that kind of resonates with your bylaw. I'll be interesting to talk at the end how you can add items to a special meeting agenda. So we're going to talk about that. So here's your agenda. We're going to talk about some meeting fundamentals, some basics, and I know a lot of you have experience. It's always good to have a refresher. The parliamentary rules are changing. The open dialogue, how you be open, accountable, transparent is really important, especially when you're doing meetings that are virtual, how you put out your amendments, how you put out your motions to make sure that when the public is viewing your videos, your streaming of your meetings, even a couple of weeks later, they're going to understand what is going on in the meetings. And I think that's really important. We're going to talk about how when meetings comes to order, we're going to talk about motions, voting, and a little bit about what motion do I use and some tools for an efficient meeting. That's kind of my specialty, is I love making sure the meetings run efficiently, not fast, but they run efficiently. So we're going to talk about some meeting fundamentals. We're going to talk about ranking motions too, how you use the motions, what's the best way to use the motions. But one of the things with your procedure bylaw that I always stress is your procedure bylaw should be your last resort. You should be able to work as a team, and that's what your procedure bylaw is. It's actually a team building tool. And it's important to understand that the overall goals of your shared decision making are to achieve good decisions, because you are elected by your community to make good decisions for your community. You want to achieve them together. Now, that doesn't mean you're always going to get along. I think debate is good. Debate is good on the various different recommendations, reports that come in from staff, because that's how you come to a really good collective decision. But you want to achieve them together, and you want to do so at a comfortable pace. And when I mean comfortable pace, that means like having a good agenda, having timely debate, good, well-written reports, and having an efficient chair actually is one of the most important parts of a really good meeting. That's good. So let's talk about meeting principles. There's some principles within parliamentary law that is important to follow. A lot of municipalities will put the principles that match them better into a procedure bylaw. These are meeting principles from Jim Lockery, who is a professional registered parliamentarian out of Ontario. They're not as rigid as Robert's rules. I like them a little better. The majority must be allowed to rule. That's why you have your majority vote in your meetings. That's how you make the decisions. The second bullet point is kind of key. The minority have rights that must be respected. Now, when you see a bylaw or a motion that requires a 2/3 vote, it's because you've taken a right away from a member. So if you're passing a motion to limit debate, then you are actually taking the right away from a member, and you should have a 2/3 vote on that. Now, every procedure bylaw is going to be customized and amended to match your community, to match how you do business. So not every local government municipality bylaw is going to be the same. It's going to have some differences, and that's okay, as long as you get the business done. Members have a right to information to make decisions. That is where you have really good agendas. Your agenda is a key part of having an efficient meeting, having well-written, clear reports in order that you as council can understand the decisions that have to be made. If a report or a matter is constantly being referred back, then that means the right information isn't being provided to you at the time. Courtesy and respect are always required. I think that's a must in all meetings. You know, you're gonna have disagreements, and we're gonna talk about that near the end. I'll give you some tips if you do have disagreements, and that's okay, but you do them in a respectful way. All members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. Everybody has the opportunity to speak, to discuss, and be part of the meeting. And you have a right to an efficient meeting. So the next thing, so you think, like, what exactly makes a great meeting? Well, one of the key goals when you're on council is to develop the confidence of working together. That's a key part of being a good council. Then there's 3 things that I always say when you are moving into your council meetings. There's 3 things you want to focus on. Number 1, your meeting objective is achieved. And that means you are meeting the needs of your community by looking at the reports, and you are making decisions. Every decision you make is done with the council agenda, because every decision you make has to be done by bylaw. So the meetings are your critical part of doing business. So you want to have a meeting objective achieved in the minimum amount of time. Now, I don't mean rush through things. It means taking the time to debate, but not going round robin 3 and 4 and repetitive throughout the meeting. That's not an effective use of time. And participants need to feel that a sensible process has been followed. And that means you've got a very clear agenda, you've got your notice provisions done well, and members, as well as members of the public, have the opportunity to speak and feel valued. Because it is important that council make the most of their time together, because that's when your authority is exercised, right? That's when you make all the decisions for your municipality. And that's through your agendas and through council decisions, through bylaws. So you have a governing document, which is required, which probably the most of you know is required under the Municipal Act. So your procedure bylaw is the guiding document, but don't make it that you use it every meeting. If you are, then you need to really look at how you're working as a team. If you're constantly looking at your procedure bylaw and go, okay, what's that? What's this? What's that? That's not, it should be your last resort. And that's where you build your team building. So there's various types of meetings. tonight's a special meeting. You may have standing committees, you have closed meetings, regular and committee of the whole, you have advisory committees, you may have some boards. There's a variety of meetings that are permitted within the Municipal Act, but there's also the fact that you do have to really govern yourself within the provisions of the meeting requirement under the Municipal Act. You have to give notice, your date, your time, and location. You also have quorum. Now, quorum, the lowest that you can go in quorum is actually not in the Municipal Act. It's actually within the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and that's 2. So say you have 11 members there and 9 have conflicts on an item, you can still have it go through as long as you have 2 members, but that's the lowest you can do. And, members discuss and deal with a matter that materially advances the business of council, right? That's what a meeting is. The key part of the meeting, as I mentioned, is the role of the chair. And if meetings are going on too long, the first thing I do when I'm looking at a board or council is I look at how is the chair facilitating. And we're going to talk about the responsibilities of the chair. Because the chair, I always like to think, is a facilitator, a referee, a psychologist. It's the hardest job to do. And especially when you're having to do it virtual and in person, it's a very difficult thing to do. So the chair's role is to facilitate and chair meetings for effective participation and decision making. That's their role. And all persons at that meeting, that means the public, members of council, staff, have an obligation to obey the legitimate orders of the presiding officer. The chair kind of rules that whole environment. So let's look at some of the responsibilities of the chair. They open the meeting at the designated time. That's the formality. Chair calls the meeting to order, makes sure the agenda is followed, recognizes when members need to speak, allows members to speak, maintains the order during debate. That's why you'll see the discussion go through the chair. Can I ask a question of staff? Or through the chair, can I ask the member to clarify their comments? That's why the presiding officer is the facilitator. They provide that leadership. The chair controls the meetings in a good way. You want it to be council. I like to be formal. I think it's very formal, but the chair accepts the motions, amendments, rules on points of order, and makes sure the meeting is done in accordance not only with the Municipal Act, but the procedure bylaw. So the effectiveness of the chair, I will tell you, has the biggest impact on a meeting. Biggest impact. Host, timekeeper, referee, you name it. And they also sign at the end, you're going to communicate the decision and the next steps. And this is why I think it's very important when you are doing virtual meetings that you articulate the matter that you've been dealing with, the decision, so that everyone knows exactly what the vote was on. And then at the end, assigns responsibilities and action items, right? That's making sure that staff follows the direction of council. So here's another thing, and sometimes you may be a chair of a standing committee. It's not always the mayor. It may be the chair, or if you're chair of an advisory committee. When you're a chair, allow the participation, but remember it's not a conversation. And when this happens, the conversation part, that's the number one reason why meetings will go long. So the key fact to remember when participating in a discussion at council is that the discussion is not a conversation. Yes, there's going to be a fluid give and take of good conversation. We all know that's one of life's joys, is to have that discussion. But a governing body meeting has different principles than a group of friends getting together. So being clear on this right from the start is going to, spare some members some bad moments if they get into a conversation. The hope is that you as a governing body, you're going to share your thoughts and your views, but out of that discussion, decisions will emerge. And under the right conditions, groups can make decisions, amazing decisions, but under the wrong conditions, groups can also make terrible decisions because they've made it be more of a conversation. So every member, so you think, what is the right condition? To me, it's every member must be able to feel free and feel open to be able to express their honest opinions about a matter that is before them. They're representing their constituents. You're in your various wards. You're representing your constituents, and you want to bring forward their comments or their concerns on a matter. So participation, active participation of everyone on council is necessary to make good decisions. If you're new, which I believe most of you are returning members of council, one of the first things that, if you're a fairly new member of council, the biggest thing is just getting the courage to make that first, motion, that first amendment, to feel the confidence that you're comfortable in the meetings, because the fear of speaking actually is the public's number 2 fear. Number 1 is dying. Number 2 is the fear of public speaking. But active participation for council means valued participation. You can stay focused on the agenda, nothing more, nothing less. Straying from the agenda is where problems can happen, because you have to be open, accountable, and transparent to the public. For example, if you don't give notice to the public's going to get upset. They need to know what's on the agenda. So active participation is key. One of the 3 things that I'll suggest for members of council to increase their confidence, and not everybody's going to be super confident at what they do, and is knowledge, proficiency, and style. So knowledge is know the rules. If you're just starting, I'll suggest there's 3 motions that I'll suggest that you learn really well. I call them the 3 must-know motions. And when I was doing my master's, I did a summary of the motions that are used most in the meetings. So you want to know how to handle the motions. You want to know how to handle amendments. You want to know when to be strict on the rules as a chair, and also when you need to relax the rules. Same goes as a member. Proficiency, review the agenda. I always suggest that if you have questions for staff that are going to be detailed, make sure you give that staff member a heads up, because it just makes the meetings flow better. And if you have to, prepare scripts, prepare your notes, understand anything that you want to put forward, because sometimes if you're in the meetings and you're listening to the discussion, sometimes you forget what you wanted to say and the point you want to get across. So that's why I encourage you to use scripts and notes to help you through the meetings. Style is when everyone learns to debate and make decisions as a team. The one thing you need to remember is your facial expressions should be minimized and respectful to everyone. And also the public needs to be respected as well. So when you are on camera, especially, you really have to watch your facial expressions. So that's one thing to look for. Okay, so let's talk about the responsibilities of members. So you as a member of council, you have to understand the agenda and purpose of the meeting. And you think, well, that's pretty basic, isn't it? Like, understand the meeting? Well, sometimes you can come into the meeting and you really haven't done your homework. So you have a responsibility to make sure that you understand what's on the agenda. You've done your homework, you've done your research, you know what questions to ask. So read the agenda. I was at a meeting once as the clerk, and the Wi-Fi crashed 5 minutes before the meeting because everybody was downloading their agenda. That was a red flag to me as the clerk, that they weren't reading their agenda. So I had to put some things in place to say, just a reminder, don't wait until the meeting to download your agenda or paper, open your packet. It's very important that you as elected official, you review all the information. And again, ask the questions before the meeting. Ask them first to the mayor. The mayor may know the answer, and then maybe seek clarification from staff. And then you want to make sure you also talk to your constituents so that you're informed on a matter, because you want to contribute insights to the agenda. And during the meeting, this is where I want you to be prepared succinctly. You want to be able to discuss the issues, take notes. And if you're proposing a new motion, I want you to ask yourself some questions. Is the language of my motion clear and specific? And if it's going to be a very complicated motion, check with your clerk before the meeting and make sure that you've got the correct wording. Is the motion stated briefly, concisely, directly? Right? Can my intent possibly be misinterpreted? That's why you want clarity. Now it's important to really use plain language when you're making your motions. Will the motion be in order? That's another thing. Does it call for action outside of the role and the responsibilities of the municipality? And you have to really make sure that the action doesn't conflict with any procedural rules. So you want to present your ideas concisely. So let's look at the responsibilities of staff, because you get once the agenda is with council, council owns that agenda. But beforehand, staff are putting together a really great agenda for you to make the decisions. So the responsibilities of staff, they're going to provide you with detailed, comprehensive reports, right? They're going to provide you with the information that you need. And it's incumbent upon council to seek clarification from staff if you need information. Be courteous at all times. Prepare the well laid out agenda. Well, you have a well laid out agenda. I've gone through your agendas and your reports, and everything's nicely well laid out. And staff also provides step-by-step meeting support. Alicia gets everybody's team gets everything ready before the meeting, manages it during the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, when the council decisions have been done and they're done by bylaw, then they will carry out council decisions. And that's why it's so important for those decisions to be very clear. Okay, so there's some decorum in the discussion. There's a parliamentary framework for discussion. And I'll say, remember 4 key things. Speak once, don't repeat, don't speak for the sake of speaking, and don't dominate the discussion, right? You want to be respectful. And this is where a good chair can really make a difference. They'll mediate. They'll not simply nod and tolerate inappropriate behavior. They will intervene. That's their role. And as a chair, sometimes that can be uncomfortable. But always remember that your comments have value. There's no point in speaking just for the sake of speaking. Have valuable speaking notes. I think it's really important. No arguing. There's none of that cross debate. That serves no purpose, and the chair will control that discussion. Now, here's the thing that I find sometimes gets members confused. A member may not speak against their motion. Now, what that means is if you've moved a motion, you've got a seconder, there's a motion on the floor, but throughout the debate, your mind has been changed. So you can certainly vote against that. But if you have made that motion, you can't speak against your motion. And when you're voting, don't explain your vote. That's not a good parliamentary framework. You don't say, well, I'm voting because A. No, you just simply do the vote based on the call of the chair. And you don't criticize a prior action of the group. You may not always agree, but once council has made the decision, you've collectively made that decision as a team. So you need to support your team and support the group. So let's talk about some decision making. All decisions will not be popular. We know that. I've sat through 15-hour meetings and still, we haven't come to a great decision. They're not always going to be popular, but finding a compromise and making decisions is hard work. It's very hard work. But after the majority decides, members support that decision of the assembly. Right? That's why you have your majority. Okay, so let's talk about the meeting will come to order. That's our next section. Okay, and we're going to talk about some of the ranking motions. We're going to go through all the motions, but I first want to talk about 3 things related to the meeting that are very important. And I've highlighted a bit about the agenda. The agenda is prepared by staff, but a key point to remember is that once that agenda has been put together, it belongs to council. So that business can be conducted in the most efficient way, right? Quorum is the responsibility of the chair. So 6 members is your quorum. And again, if there's conflicts, the lowest you can go is 2, right? It's the responsibility of the chair to determine that quorum is present. If a quorum is not present or you're questioning it, you remember the acronym FARM. Okay, so if you don't have quorum, you're going to farm. You're going to fix the time to adjourn. You're going to adjourn. You're going to recess, or you're going to take measures to get quorum. So if all the members have decided to take coffee at the same time, you're going to get them back into the room so that you have quorum. So you've taken measures. Now, the minutes are the responsibility of the clerk, and the clerk under the Municipal Act is required to do them without note or comment. So you're not going to have your comments within the minutes. They are the official legal record of a public meeting. They're the historical record of the county, and it's what was done at the meeting. They're not verbatim. Okay. The purpose is to refresh the memory of members who attended the last meeting. Now, when minutes are on an agenda, they are there just to say, is there any errors or omissions? They're not meant to bring items off the floor out of the minutes. They're simply a record of what was done in the meeting, right? So that's why it's really important that you understand the role of the minutes. They're simply a record of what was done. Let's talk about motions now. Now, you don't have to know all these different classifications of motions, but I think it's important to understand, have a basic understanding of their classifications. So there's various types of motions. So there's a main motion, there's subsidiary motions, there's privileged motions, there's incidental motions, and they're bring back motions. Now, when I help clerks in municipalities with their procedure bylaws, I like to get them very simplified. Don't put them into these categories, but it's good to understand them. So you think, what does motions mean? Well, motion is a proposal by a member of the group. So you'll have recommendations from staff on your agendas. And that if someone moves and seconds, that's a motion. But some of the basic rules for using motions in Robert's rules, that's my basis, or the procedure bylaw, is they're positive motions. They're not worded in the negative. One person speaks at a time. That's why quite often a mayor, the chair, the presiding officer will do a round robin type of review around the room of who wants to speak. You cannot raise another motion until all of their motions are settled and adjourned. So you couldn't, deal with a main motion and bring up another main motion. We're going to go through some examples so you can see. And I know this is going to be old hat for some of you, but it's good to have that refresher. All members have equal rights to be heard when discussing a motion. Instead of saying, I think we should do this, which you may want to do in a formal meeting, it's I move that. You're going to have certain wording, and then it's really good for the public to understand where you are in the agenda. So you're going to move that. I move that item 2 on the agenda, dealing with stop signs at ABC Street. Have that clarity. It may, you may get into the habit of just move, second that, but really, when you're televised and when you're streaming, it's really important so that everyone knows where you are. So the most important form of motion, as I've mentioned, is the main motion, right? It brings the business before your assembly. That's its role. For consideration on any subject matter. It could be public works, it could be fire, it could be clerks, it could be finance, any of those things. Now, subsidiary motions, and we're going to go over examples, are motions that affect the main motion. They need to be dealt with prior to the main motion. And they have a precedence, what I call the pyramid of precedence, or a ladder of precedence. Now, privilege motions are often something of great importance or urgency. They aren't related to the main motion, but, they are, for example, adjourn. That's a privilege motion. Incidental motions are considered kind of housekeeping motions. They take precedence over the main motions, and for example, point of order or suspend the rules. Those are kind of incidental motions. And then the bring back motions are the motions that I would say cause the most problem if they're not done correctly. So bring back motions exactly what it sounds like. You are bringing back a decision that council's already made. So you want to bring it back for consideration again. And there's different types, and we're going to talk about that. Those are the ones that can cause the most trouble if not done correctly. So you have your main subsidiary, your privileged class of motions, and they make up what is 13 ranking motions. So it's called the pyramid or order of precedence. That's what the ranking motions are. I like to look at it as a pyramid because it makes more sense when you're making the motion and then when you're voting. It just makes more sense. So we're going to talk about each motion has a rank, the precedent of motion, and rules associated with it. And I bet you've been using them in order and rank and not really understood that there's an order and a rank. You just go, okay, I got to make that motion first. So some of the rules associated with motion, maybe, does it need a seconder? Can it be debated? Can it be amended? What's the vote to pass? Is it a majority vote? Is it 2/3 vote? Do you do things by consensus? So those are things that, you have to make sense of the motions. So all motions start with the phrase, I move. I move that. Item 2 of the agenda, item 3 of the agenda, or report ABC. That's what they all start with. And a recommendation, so from your agenda, a recommendation will be in the form of a formal motion. So tip 1 is a majority vote. Each motion shall be decided by a majority vote of the members present, provided there's quorum. You'll have a mover and seconder. Then you have debate and vote. This is where I find sometimes things get more relaxed in the committees. What may happen, well, I'd say a lot of municipalities, they will start the debate and vote before they do the mover and seconder. If that is kind of your how you do your business and it makes your meetings flow, then that's okay. Robert's Rules considers the 12 and under to be a small board and a little more flexible with the rules. But the proper way is you do put the mover secondary, then you debate, and then you vote. So if you're new, I will suggest you learn 3 motions. I call them 3 must-know motions. And they're the most important to learn. And they are your main motion, right? It introduces business. Your amendment, it modifies the motion. And then the amendment modifies the amendment. Sometimes this is confusing when an amendment goes on the floor. You automatically assume you're moving the main motion, but you're not. You're actually amending the amendment, and then the amendment does the main motion, amends the main motion. So we'll go like what happens if this goes through, if it doesn't go through. We'll go through that. So what exactly is a main motion? Well, it is the basic form of motion whose introduction brings business before the assembly. That's the purpose of your agenda. That's the items you're dealing with. Some of the characteristics of a main motion are it's in writing. You have it in the agenda. Clear, very clear and unambiguous. Stated in the positive. It has to comply with your procedure bylaw. And it's in order when no other business is pending. So then we talk about the amendment, the second must-know motion. It's a motion to modify the wording of a pending motion. It's called a perfecting motion. You are perfecting the main motion so that you are comfortable with it. An amendment is actually called a primary amendment. And then you have an amend the amendment, and it's a motion to modify the wording of the amendment. So your amendment's primary, amend the amendment is considered a secondary amendment. You can't have a third level of amendment. Just can't. So here's the key. So I have these numbers up here up the side. So when you are making the motions, you make the motions going up the pyramid. And you do this for the ranking motions. But when the mayor, the presiding officer, takes the vote, they're going to go down the pyramid, right? They're going to go down the pyramid. So they're going to make the motions but the presiding officer is going to take the vote on the amendment first, then the amendment, and then the main motion. So you make the motions up, take the vote going down the pyramid. Easy way to remember it. When I go in and train, advisory boards and small committees that have a lot of volunteer members, this is the best way for them to learn Robert's Rules or Procedure Bylaws for their meetings. Just make it very simple. These are really all the 3 motions they'll need, aside from procedural, like, adjourn. So how can you modify? You can add, strike out, substitute, insert, delete. That's how you modify a motion. Oops, let's go back here. Make the motions up, voting goes down. Introduces business, modifies the wording of the amendment. So that's your 3 must-know motions, but I'd like to bet most of you know that really well and do it a lot in the meetings, but it's good to have those reminders. So let's check our understanding. So first of all, you're going to have your main motion. Introduces, modify, amendment, right? So when you make the motions, they move up the pyramid. So here's an example. The main motion was I move to purchase 8 chairs for the boardroom. The amendment, strike out 8 chairs and insert the number 9. So it was moved and seconded, right? So this main motion was moved and seconded. Amendment moved and seconded. Then you do the amendment. In this case, the amendment was to strike out 9 and insert 10. But now, so you've made the motions up the pyramid. The voting is going to go down the pyramid. So the chair is going to take the vote on the amendment first, right? Then the amendment, then the main motion. So let's talk about amending the amendment fails. So what if this one here, amend the amendment, fails? So you had a mover and seconder. The chair then takes the vote. The chair will say, okay, we're taking a vote on the amendment which is to strike out 9 and insert 10. So if that fails, right, the amendment and the main motion stay the same. If amending the amendment passes, right, so if the strikeout 9 and insert 10 goes through, it changes the amendment. Not the main motion at this point, it's changing the amendment. So this becomes strikeout 8 and insert 10. The amendment changes, right? So if the amendment fails, right, the main motion stays the same. There we go. And if the amendment passes, then the main motion becomes I move to purchase 9 chairs for the boardroom. Okay. Nice and simple way the main motion changes. And then the amended motion becomes I move to purchase 9 chairs for the boardroom. And the presiding officer would take the vote for the main motion as amended. Okay. All clear. All righty. It's our time. I'm talking fast here, so hopefully I'll slow it down a bit here. So ranking of motions. Your motions are arranged in a specific order in which they must be considered and acted upon. That's why I called the ranking of motions. Now, not all motions are ranked. The subsidiary, privileged, and main are your ranked motions. And there's 13 of them. So here's a good way to look at this is where you make the motions up, but you take the vote down. And near the end, I'm going to show you a motion chart, because if you're fairly new or you just want a reminder, it's good to have a motion chart in front of you. So your main motion, although it's number 1, you think that's the highest ranking, number 1 is actually the lowest ranking. Here's your subsidiary, postpone indefinitely, and we're going to talk about how you would use these different motions. Number 8, lay on the table, is the most misused motion. So we'll talk about that. Call for the orders of the day. I don't find this is used a lot here in Ontario's local municipalities. It's basically if the chair goes off the agenda, then someone could say, could I call for the orders of the day, which means can I get back on track with the agenda. Recess, adjourn, and fix the time to adjourn. So that's your privileged, these ones here, your subsidiary, which they help change the main motion. Okay, so let's talk about the subsidiary motions. So the subsidiary motion assists in changing or disposing of the main motion. So postpone indefinitely. If you want to kill a motion, you don't want to deal with it ever again, then this is the motion you're going to use. You're postponing it indefinitely. Amendment, we talked about this. There's a primary and secondary, which is the amendment and amend the amendment. Refer to a committee. Right? You may have a matter on the table you're dealing with and realize that it needs a little more information, so you may refer it to a committee. Postpone to a certain time. This is the motion that actually should be used instead of tabling motion. Postpone to a certain time would be, say you have a meeting and perhaps it's a snowstorm and your delegation hasn't arrived and you know that they need to speak on the item and you want to postpone that item to the next meeting, then this is the motion you would use. Postpone to a certain time. So you're going to postpone it to the next regular meeting of council instead of tabling. Tabling actually should be used for that existing meeting. We'll talk about that. Limit or extend limits of debate. Remember I was saying to you, if you take a right away from a member, then subsidiary, but this does require different voting. This is where I find this in a lot of procedure bylaws, they will have it as a majority vote. It's customized to what works for your municipality. Call the question. That is if you've had enough debate and a member gets the attention of the chair, calls the question, and then the chair has to immediately call the question. That determines whether you're going to stop the debate and vote on the question. And of course, the table. That is, make sure a member of parliament is advised about that decision. Then that's, you're just adding someone to be ensured they're notified. That's kind of friendly. All right, so let's talk about some. So I always say there's 3 must-know motions. Then I like to talk about the motions that are used the most aside from those 3. So there's actually 7, what I call 7 building blocks motions. So the next one is refer to a committee. It's a motion to send a pending question to a committee. As I said, if you want to send something to your heritage committee. Here's the key that sometimes that gets missed when you refer an item to a committee. Specify a time when you want to report back. So it's referred to committee to report back to council. Maybe it's 3 months, 4 months, however much time you feel they will need to properly investigate the matter. And then a committee they're going to investigate it more thoroughly. So that's what a referral to a committee does. Postpone to a definite time. It's a motion to decline to take a position on a pending motion at that meeting. So it should specify time to which the motion's postponed. That's why it's definite time. This is the one that should be used instead of tabling. It can be debated as far as its own merits, date and time. Right? Lay on the table, what does it do? It's a motion to set aside temporarily to accommodate something else of immediate urgency. So say, for example, you're in the meeting. Use the example I used before. A delegation is late because of the snowstorm. And so what you do is you take that matter and you put it aside temporarily until that delegation can be heard. And then you bring it back to be dealt with. That's kind of a good analogy. It can't be debated and it can't be amended. You're just laying it on the table temporarily. And then call the question. Now here's the thing though. When a call to question is made, the call to question still has to follow the process of being recognized by the chair. So the chair has to recognize that mover on calling the question. It closes debate and vote immediately. Right? So that's why it's a 2/3 vote. Remember, because you're taking the right away from somebody. Can't be debated, can't be amended. The chair will call the vote, say, I call the question on item, whatever you're dealing with on the agenda, takes the vote on that. If it goes through, if it's carried, then what is before you is the motion that you've been dealing with. Here's one area. I'm going to talk about steps to make a motion. These are actually the proper steps, and I encourage chairs or anybody who, when you're making them, to really look at these steps, because when you're doing streaming or YouTube, this really makes it clear so that everybody knows exactly what is being what you're dealing with, what item you've got on the agenda. And there's 4 key steps that you need to follow with every motion. This is a standard in parliamentary law. A member makes the motion. So that I move that. So there's the mover. Another member seconds the motion. Now here's the thing. A member of the motion supports that motion. A seconder is basically saying, yes, they don't have to be in favor of that motion, but there's basically saying, yes, I agree that matter should be discussed. So they're seconding that motion. The chair will then state the question, which means the chair is going to state the recommendation. It's been moved and seconded by Councillor A and B that we deal with ABC. This is when you'll debate the motion. This is where quite often you move and second, I'll see it go to this step. Then they'll state the question for the vote. And that does happen. One of the things, the remarks that the debate that's going on has to pertain to what is on the floor and addressed through the chair, right? I like council should be a little more formal than your committees. And members don't speak directly to each other. You're always going through the chair. There's not that conversation back and forth. And then the chair is going to announce the result of vote. That matter is carried, and then move on to the next item. Or that motion is lost, or if it's a recorded vote, that motion is carried on a vote of 6 to 4. Okay, let's talk about voting. How's my time here? Okay, we're doing good. I want to make sure we have time for chatting at the end if you have any questions. So there's 3, I want to talk about the voting. First of all, every member of council shall have 1 vote. That's in the Municipal Act, Section 243. There's a majority vote and a 2/3 vote and a minimum number of votes. And then it's in your procedure bylaw. I looked at the sections 35, 36, goes right on to section 42. That deals with your voting. So majority vote means that more than half of the votes cast. Most motions require a majority vote. Right? That's how you get your business done, right? 2/3 means at least 2/3 of the votes cast. This type of vote, again, if you're taking the rights away of members. And minimum number of votes, there'll be times when a meeting has quorum, and again, the lowest you can go is 2. It's not in the Municipal Act, it's not in your procedure bylaw, it's in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Okay? But this is where you're going to have changes if you've had a conflict. If you declared a conflict at the beginning of the meeting, you don't take vote, you don't take part in the discussion or vote on the matter. Okay? So let's talk about what motion to use. We'll talk about those motions to use. What do you use? And we've gone over the different ranking motions, and sometimes you get in the meeting and you go, wow, what motion should I have used? Was that correct? And here's just some guidelines to go. So what motion do I use if I want to ask a question? You could do a parliamentary inquiry. So if you want some clarity on a procedure that's gone, again, you're going through the chair. You can do a parliamentary inquiry. Not often used. Most people just do point of order request for information. Want more information, or maybe a member of council has stated something new in the debate. You can go to the chair. Could I ask information for clarity on that? Change a name, location, amount, or other variable in a motion. Amend or amend the amendment. Those are what we use, the 3 must-know motions. So what motion do I use if I want to delay action until later in the same or the next meeting? I'm going to postpone to a certain time, definitely. If that's disagree with the chair's ruling or decision, you could do point of order, you could appeal the decision of the chair. Those are the process that you need to follow. So what motion do I use if I want to stop debate? You're going to call the question. And if you want to point out a violation of the rules, so say the chair's had a main motion moved and seconded, then accepts an amendment, but then forgets about the amendment and starts dealing with the main motion, a member could call point of order. Okay. Alrighty. Let's talk about some tools for an efficient meeting. You think this may be common sense, but actually it's really important that everybody understand there's some really good meeting efficiencies. Show up on time. I think, sometimes there's going to be things that get in the way and you'll end up, being late, and it's not up to the chair to catch you up to speed if you're coming in late to the meeting. You have to get in the chair, in your seat, and get yourself up to speed. This is where having a well-constructed agenda is key to meeting efficiency. We talk about prepare for the meeting. That's a really big part of your job. That before the meeting, I think that's probably a lot more work is done than during the meeting, because you want to speak to your constituents. You want to talk to staff if you need clarity. You want to talk to the mayor if you need clarity. So prepare for the meeting. Make your notes. Make your questions so that you don't forget to bring up anything. And again, try not to lose focus. Stay on that agenda. It's easy to get sidetracked, and we're going to talk about some tools to keep you on track. And again, have an effective chair. That is the most important role. One of the best the chairs at regional Chair Anderson, the late regional Chair Anderson from Durham, was probably one of the best chairs I know. He would manage to manage a 30-member council with efficiency, but really ensuring that there was healthy, respectful debate. It's an art form. It's very hard to do. And again, understand your procedure bylaw, but don't make it use it with common sense and try to avoid those personal attacks, those comments. I would say too, try to avoid the energy vampires in your room, in your meetings. And that's why you wanted to use the subtle art of intervention. And we're going to go over with some examples. Especially if it's derailing discussions on motions. If you're getting off track, and it's easy to get off track. If you're passionate about something and you start on another matter, the chair's going to rein you in. But you want to create an understanding and transform. You want to have that positive culture in your meetings. As John Gordon, who's a motivational speaker, says, your positive energy must be greater than all the negativity. So try and eliminate the energy vampires in your room. So here's some tools for meeting chair and participants. And I call this the effective meeting frustration chart. It's okay. Let's have effective meetings, but there is some areas of frustration. And if this occurs, so say there's digression, everybody's getting, off track. This is what you as a member or you as a chair could say. Point of order. Can we please get back on topic? Or can we please focus on the core issue, which is ABC? It's a very respectful way of getting everybody back on track instead of, shutting off the mic or getting frustrated with a member. This is a very respectful way to get that digression back on track for your meeting. Perhaps there's some interruptions happening. Maybe there's the cross debate happening, or, there's just general interruptions. Again, you could use that point of order. Could we have one person speaking at a time? Or can we please hear people out so that everybody feels respected, that their voice is heard? And again, we want to avoid this. We want to avoid those personal attacks. And again, that's your point of order. We should be focusing on issues, not people. And it's going to happen that you're going to be passionate about a matter and you're not always going to agree. But remember, it's not about the person. You're talking about the issue, and this is a really nice way of bringing it back on track. Point of order, let's focus on the issues, not people. Here, if you're rambling, or if, the group as a whole or one member is starting to ramble and getting off track, and I've seen it happen recently. I watched a meeting and they had a main motion on the floor. Then all of a sudden there was another main motion on the floor, and the meeting got very convoluted and everybody was rambling on different items. So you really want to make sure you keep everything in check. Can we please keep our comments brief? That's a nice way of saying to the members, you're getting off track. Let's stick to your comments. Or I'm concerned we may run out of time for significant issues later on. That's a nice way of saying, let's get back on track. Repetitive debate, that can happen. Are we ready to close debate and vote this motion? Excuse me, let me sec here. Or I move to close debate, or I call the question, right? If the debate keeps going the round robin, you want to get the debate closed, especially if everybody's repeating themselves and making the meeting long. And again, the side conversations, the chair can simply say, can we please have one conversation at a time? Or a member could go, point of order. Mayor Bailey, can we please have one conversation at a time? Keeps everything flowing. And sometimes you may have unbalanced participation. I find this happens when there's a number of new members. They're nervous at the first few meetings, and not knowing when to say, not knowing what to say, not knowing how to say it. And as the chair, this is a nice way of saying, I'm wondering if we could hear from members who have not spoken. It's then up to them if they want to speak, but the opportunity's been provided. That if they want to speak, they can. It just, makes them a little more relaxed. If there's an unclear motion, do never ever hesitate to ask for clarity on what you're voting on or what you're discussing. I think we've all had that deer in the headlight look going, what just happened? What vote did we just do? Especially if you've been in a long meeting or there's been a lot of items on the agenda. Here's a nice way to say, can we please have the motion repeated, or perhaps you needed to amend the motion to make it clear, because remember, an amendment is to perfect the motion. But never, ever, ever feel uncomfortable about asking for clarity on what you're voting on. You need to know that. So let's talk about some frequently asked questions. That now I have thousands of questions that I've assembled over the years. Must debate on a motion stop immediately as soon as any member calls the question? Now, here's the thing that often gets missed, and I mentioned it earlier. A member must obtain the floor. That means they're getting the attention of the chair. It'll be up to the chair how they like to, sometimes it's a hand signal. That'll be up to the chair how they recognize the member. So member obtains the floor to speak to the chair, and then the chair will move the question and obtain a seconder. That requires a 2/3 vote. I have seen this as majority vote in some procedure bylaws. I prefer it be 2/3 because you're taking the right away from a member. But I know it is in some procedure bylaws as majority. If a motion has been rejected, can members bring back the same motion before the members to vote on it again? So this is where I talk about those bring back motions. Be very careful with that. A main motion that is defeated usually cannot be brought up again at the same meeting unless someone who voted on the prevailing side, so that's the winning side, moves to reconsider the motion. So it's going to be a 2-step process. Now you're going to have the motion to reconsider. If that goes through, and then you would have the motion as it was last considered by council. So it's a 2-step process. It's not meant to be easy. How do you deal with a friendly amendment? Well, as I've mentioned, an amendment, friendly or otherwise, still has to be adopted by the full body, your full council, either by vote or perhaps you use a unanimous consent process. Okay, so that's going to be how your chair is going to handle your friendly amendments. And again, when a main motion has multiple parts, is it possible that it can be broken down into separate parts and voted on separately? Yes, a motion to divide the question would be used. And especially if you have, you just want to debate one part of that motion, use the motion to divide. Get the ones you all agree on, voted on, off the table, and then you're just dealing with the ones that you need some clarity on. Can a member speak against the motion they moved? And this is where I said the member can move the main motion. They can vote against the motion, but they can't speak against the motion. And don't move a motion if you're not in support of it. You want to make sure that you're in support of that motion. And again, a seconder is just saying, yes, I agree that item should be debated. Let's chat about it. And once it's moved and seconded and starts discussion, it is owned by council. It's not owned by the mover, and it's not owned by the seconder. It's owned by the body. Is it permissible to request to withdraw your own motion after it's been debated a while? Yes, but again, you still have to obtain the floor, and a motion can be withdrawn anytime up until that vote is taken. Okay, so those are some of the most frequent questions I get asked. So now, and of course, I love this. It's with Oprah. You get a meeting, and you get a meeting, and you get a meeting. We all love those meetings. That's kind of my presentation. And again, it's just, I do have to do the disclaimer. It's provided for general education purposes. It's not legal or business advice. So I know we have time. If you have any questions, I'll leave it up to, I will now give back to the chair to take over the meeting.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sure there'll be a couple of questions for you. Are there
Great.
questions for Debbie? Councilor Miller, you're first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Debbie, for your presentation. A very specific question. You talked about we can appeal a vote, I think is what you said.
The decision, yeah.
The decision.
Yeah.
Does that have to be done before you move on to the next agenda item?
Yes, it does. It's dealt with immediately.
Okay. And why would you appeal it? Just because you think maybe the vote was miscounted, or what kind of grounds would you appeal it?
I saw it used a lot in the regional level if the county made a decision and weren't happy with the decision, or you'd ask for clarity on the motion and the chair made the decision and you want to appeal the decision. So say, for example, you put a motion forward and the chair said that motion's out of order. It's not germane to the main motion, right? So it doesn't match the main motion. You could appeal that. You say, I appeal that decision of the chair. Then that's when council can make the decision. Is that amendment or that match that germane to that motion? That's a good example. That's kind of when I see it used the most.
And last question, thank you. Is the appeal is just a simple majority then?
It depends on your procedure bylaw. I've seen 2/3 on the appeal the decision. I can't remember what it is in your bylaw, to be honest. It is 2/3 normally to appeal the decision, but I didn't look up that motion in your procedure bylaw.
That'll be my homework. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, or I'll look it up. Yeah.
Any other
Look that one up. Good question.
Councilor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 or 4 questions, if I might. I don't want to monopolize,
Sure.
but I do have a couple questions,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
if I might. In your presentation, you talked a little bit about transparency,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the legislation has changed over the years with regard to what you can and can't do in meetings. It's my understanding that in special meetings, what's on the agenda is what's on the agenda, and you cannot add things to an agenda of a special meeting according to legislation. Is that correct?
Correct.
If someone
It's also
does,
parliamentary law.
if someone does add something or wants to add something to a special meeting, how is the best way to rectify that?
I think number one, you'd have to do a motion to suspend the rules. And if I was your clerk, the best advice I would say to you is the public affected by bringing this matter up in a special meeting. that you are taking the opportunity for members of council for members of the public to speak on that matter, or have you given council enough information in order to deal with that matter? But if you are suspending the rules in a special meeting to maybe the province has come out with some last minute legislation and you want to just go on record that that information has come in, so it's motion to suspend and maybe you're going to refer the matter to staff, then I'd go, okay, that may be okay because you're going to have the opportunity to be open, accountable, transparent at some point. But I would be very cautious about adding anything to a special meeting without doing your notice provisions, right? There's that whole notice provisions that is required under the Municipal Act. So I'd be cautious about that.
And the reason I asked that is that happened tonight, and we can deal with that later.
Yeah, and the chair will determine if it's appropriate.
And you talked about suspending the rules.
Mm-hmm.
In Robert's Rules of Order, I believe to suspend the rules, it requires 2/3 majority.
Right, you're taking the right away from someone. Yeah.
And in most procedural bylaws, to suspend the rules takes 2/3 majority.
Again, it's going to depend on the municipality. I did training for a municipality last week, and it was majority. They had it as majority.
Ours.
But your procedure bylaw trumps Robert's Rules, right? Your procedure bylaw is your governing document. If it's not covered in your procedure bylaw, then you'll fall back to either procedure bylaw will either say Borno rules or Robert's Rules, or sometimes the decision of the chair. Mm-hmm. But your procedure bylaw is your guiding document.
Our procedural bylaw just requires a simple majority to suspend the rules. So
and that's a decision that council's made as a whole. Yeah.
So my question is, can our procedural bylaw suspend rules by a simple majority? Can it suspend a rule that requires 2/3 majority vote?
Your procedure bylaw trumps. That's your governing document, and the Municipal Act provides municipality with the opportunity to have a procedure bylaw.
So according to our procedural bylaw, we can
requires a simple majority.
We can suspend a rule in our procedural bylaw that requires a 2/3 majority vote. For example, if I wanted to suspend the rule that says we require a 2/3 vote to reconsider a motion, will our procedural bylaw allow me to do that?
You want to suspend the rules to what? Reconsider?
Our procedural bylaw says a reconsider motion requires 2/3 vote, 2/3 majority. Our procedural bylaw also says we can suspend the rules by a simple majority. So my question is, can we suspend a reconsideration motion with a simple majority according to our suspending rule provision?
Off the top of my head, I would say no. I've lost camera here. See, that's where you'd want to investigate it. But I would say no, your reconsideration motion takes, because you've got a majority vote. Right? I'd have to look at your procedure
and that's
bylaw.
why most procedural bylaws to suspend the rules require 2/3 vote. But we can get to that
I'm just gonna
later on. And just a couple more questions, if I might.
Sure.
Since I have an expert here. You had mentioned about withdrawing motions, and you indicated one of your frequently asked questions. Yes, you can withdraw a motion.
Right up to the vote. Yeah. I've lost the screen here for some reason.
Our procedural bylaw says this: when the question under consideration sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Our procedural bylaw says this: once read and stated by the mayor or presiding officer, a motion may not be withdrawn without the consent of the majority of members.
I like that. Yeah,
So
that's
if I
good.
moved a motion and then the heat got on and I said, I want to withdraw that motion, according to our procedural bylaw, I can't do that unless the majority of members of council vote to allow that.
That's correct. That's how your procedure bylaw is written.
And that procedure bylaw trumps the Robert's Rules of Orders, which you based your
It
answer
does,
to the
and
frequent
I
business.
actually, well, I tried to match it as best I could going through your procedure bylaw. Yeah,
And I'm just, the reason I'm doing this is just for
no, that's good.
instruction purposes more than anything else. I'm not
Yeah,
trying
and
to be critical.
it's good to go through your procedure bylaw every term of council and say what's working and what's not working. And like I say, your procedure bylaw is created to match how you do business. Mm-hmm.
And there was another thing you had mentioned with regard to division of the questions, motion
Right.
with distinct propositions. And you suggested that it can be moved to divide the questions, a division of the question.
Yeah.
And
If you've got the example I would use, if you've got a 6-part recommendation, you agree on 4, you could do motion to divide to deal with items 1 to 4. So those are dealt with, and then you would be dealing with 5 and 6.
And I just wanted to say that our procedural bylaw says this: when the question under consideration contains distinct propositions, upon the request of any member, the vote upon each proposition shall be taken separately. So that's saying we don't need to move a motion, we can just request it.
Yes, based on what you just read out to me, yes.
And my final question, if I might,
Yeah.
is with regard to there's always complications with regard to deferring, referring, tabling, laying on the table, and postponing motions. We get that wrong all the time around here. And
Majority councils do. Don't.
And I appreciate the clarifications with regard to tabling as it relates to postponing. Quite often we table motions and we should be postponing them. And you made that very
as
clear.
I said, that's the most misused motion is tabling. Tabling is meant to table it in that meeting. Think of it taking your agenda and put it in the middle of your table. Go, okay, we'll deal with that later.
And there are motions to refer the question, but a motion to defer the question really isn't it's you don't defer anything, you either table it or you postpone it.
Yep.
So when we say a move to defer, we shouldn't be doing that either.
Not unless you've got it defined in your procedure bylaw.
Which it isn't.
Yeah.
And if my last question, Mr. Mayor, sorry, because
I lost sound.
You had mentioned at the beginning of your presentations the difference between resolutions and bylaws. And
you have a recommendation. When you pass it, it becomes a resolution.
And I'm just wondering if you can just elaborate a little bit on the difference between a resolution and a bylaw as it is placed to regulate things. For example, if I wanted to pass a resolution, just a funny example, that no dogs are allowed in a cemetery, and I move that no dogs be allowed in the cemetery, and it passes, what status does that have?
You have a confirming bylaw that confirms all the actions of council.
And I've got that written down too. Resolutions with confirming the proceedings of council is the last thing we do, and a lot of people don't know why we do it. Of every council meeting, we confirm the proceedings of council.
That's the purpose of your confirming bylaw. Because some of your motions will be administrative in nature, there's others that are going to be requiring a specific bylaw. For example, changing, the speed limit or things like that. Yeah.
And thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. I hope I didn't bore you.
No, they're great questions.
Thank you, Councillor Chair. Are there any other questions for Debbie?
Could I just provide one clarity on that appeal the decision? I just had to double check. It's a majority vote for appeal the decision of the chair. I was second guessing myself there.
Okay, Councillor Bell, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Debbie, for the presentation. I've been on council 1 year, but I've learned one term, but I've learned something more tonight. So thank you for that.
Good.
What I've learned, I think, is that we have a number of practices which are not quite in conformity with your rule set. For example, we do not very often state the question prior to calling the vote. There's an assumption that we know what we're going to vote on, which your point, I think, was quite well made, that if we're broadcasting these proceedings, then maybe it's appropriate for us to just restate the motion before we actually call the vote on it.
I think so. It's good communication.
Yeah, thank you. And the second thing, we do regularly talk about friendly amendments, and I think you've clarified what that is or is not, and I think we just need to reflect on that a little. Third point, we're asked by our clerk in a very polite way before each meeting, would you be prepared to move this particular motion? And I politely say, of course I would. I always do. But I hadn't fully registered that if I don't like what I'm putting on the table, I can't actually talk against it. So
right.
I will think a little harder. So if I say in the future, Alicia, I'm sorry, you know what the answer is for that. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's a good practice. As a clerk, I would do the same. And I would always just make sure, are you in favor of this motion? You can vote against it.
Yeah,
but when you're putting a motion on the floor.
I apologize for talking over. We don't actually ask, are we in favor? We just ask, will we bring it forward? So I think we need to think about our own wording on that one. And a final point, I think, sorry, one final thought. We occasionally have verbal motions in our meetings. And I think I heard you say that we should have all of our motions written. So how do you suggest that we deal with motions which come up during the course of a meeting?
Are you talking amendments or?
No, motions.
Or brand new motions?
Brand new motions. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm speaking through to Debbie here directly because she's sitting right in front of me now.
Amendments are, you'd be done on the floor, but if it's a very complicated or confusing motion, I'll suggest they go in writing so that at least the clerk has clarity that if, you're asked throughout the meeting, kind of have clarity on what we're voting on, then that motion is clearly written out. So there's no confusion.
So let me give you an example, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Very often we have delegations, and as the delegations come to a close, the chair of the meeting will say, how do we want to deal with this? And very often we will say, I'd like to make a motion to give this particular organization $10,000 from our fund. And that's the kind of motion that often comes up. And I'm assuming you don't have any real problems with that. That's not a major motion. It's not a complicated motion.
No, I wouldn't say that's a complicated motion. No.
So you'd have no problems if we continue that practice?
Right. As long as, you just got to be cautious that if it's not on the agenda, that, if it's something that the public would be interested in, you're not putting a motion forward that you have an open, accountable, transparent, and provided notice on. Yeah. And I'm sure your clerk tells you that.
She does.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mayor, I have one philosophical thought. I think I heard Debbie say that when a decision is taken, the members must support that decision.
Should.
And I'm philosophically challenged now on this one because I can accept it, but I'm not sure I can always support it. I guess the furthest I could go is not to fight against it in public, but I've never considered the council to be a team. I think we represent individual constituencies on behalf of the whole of the county. And there are many times when, and I've seen it in the last term of council, that we have disagreements and that we accept the majority decision, but we don't individually necessarily support it. And you've given me some food for thought there. Would you like to expand on how we as councillors should deal with this?
Well, I think that, that goes to a whole communication part. You as a councillor can certainly say to your constituents, I put the case forward, I'm not in agreement, but this is the collective decision of council. That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful.
That came up in that's come up in a number of trainings I've done. It's a very hard thing for council with social media and putting out your position, but at the end you are making a decision collectively for your community.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the delegation. Well done. Learned more tonight in the last hour and a half than a few years. My question is, you touched on it, the role of the chair. And I just need clarification. If you're a chair of a standing committee and you've got concerns or questions, should you remove yourself from the chair and have the vice chair take over so you can participate in the discussion?
That is a good practice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for speaking to us tonight. I promise you I've never laid on the table. And I'm sure you won't be back to speak to us after what Councillor Chambers did to you, but thank you for this one shot at teaching us things.
That's good.
It's been
thank you
great.
Very much for the opportunity.
And we really have learned a lot tonight, so thank you.
Thank you.
Call on Councillor McAlpine, please.
By Debbie Wilcox be received as information.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. Good night. Moving on to 4.2, Michael Bradley.
Am I running this or are you running this?
Okay. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I think for the rest of the evening, our plan is to provide departmental overviews as part of our orientation program for the new term of council. I think how I would summarize what we're hoping to achieve tonight is to tell you who we are and what we do, and noting that we're going to try to compress these into fairly short presentations. The departments, some of them are quite large. There's lots of folks involved. And so I would encourage you as individual councillors, if you want to learn more about the departments, feel free to reach out either to myself or Mr. Lee in the near future, or directly to the general managers, because it's a lot to take in this evening, but this is I think a high-level snapshot of again, who we are and what we do. So I'm going to start off with the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer. We have already talked about this a little bit over the course of this year because we are moving towards a transition period. But the CAO is the senior staff member and reports directly to council. And as we learned in some of our earlier orientation exercises, the CAO is outlined in the Municipal Act and having responsibility for general control and management of the municipality. Here at the county, the CAO supervises all of the general managers, the county solicitor and corporate counsel, and the chief of the Brantford Paramedic Services. And the Office of the CAO also undertakes a various number of special projects and strategic projects, and coordinates with the County of Brant Public Library. The public library is not part of our reporting structure, but the library CEO and I meet fairly frequently to make sure that our organizations are running in an aligned fashion. Our organizational structure is fairly typical of most large organizations. We have a chief executive at the top, in this case a CAO. We have departments, which I would suggest are broad, multifaceted groups, usually with some common or very similar aim or intent. And then we have divisions that report up to departments, which are a little more portfolios that tend to be more focused. And then we have sections, which are very specific activities within those focused portfolios. This is my reporting structure here, noting that the general managers and the solicitor and corporate counsel form our senior management team. We meet on a monthly basis to make sure that the business of the municipality is proceeding effectively, as well as Chief King and Mr. Crozier, who's the project manager to the Office of the CAO, also report to me. So the CAO, I've mentioned, implements the directions and strategies of council. We expected to provide advice and guidance to aid council in your decision making. I am the chair of the senior management team, and there's a various amount of delegated authority that has been provided to the CAO to operate the business. The Brantford Paramedic Service, we will be doing a comprehensive orientation program to the Paramedic Services Committee, which is a joint committee of the city and the county. Chief King couldn't join us this evening. He is at an off-site training right now. But I will make sure that, or Daryl will make sure that Chief King does get introduced to council at a later time. And it might be worth us circling back and doing some orientation on the paramedic service. It is one of our larger operations, but it does provide service to both the county as well as the city. And it's delivered through a shared services agreement between the city and the county. But at a high level, we provide medical treatment and transportation for life-threatening medical emergencies to citizens both here in the county and into the city. We also have a very successful community paramedicine program, and its design is actually to keep people out of our healthcare system. It's to keep them at home, and we believe it is one of the key solutions to the challenges facing our healthcare program. And it also provides medical coverage for special events, and it has a public relations arm that provides citizens with information about how to prevent illness and injury. The Solicitor and Corporate Counsel also reports up to the Office of the CAO, and Jody will be providing. Jody Zudem is our Solicitor and Corporate Counsel, and Jody, you will be next week providing an orientation program on legal services. She's also going to touch on some of the other components of the business that report up to her, but she does oversee and manage the county's legal affairs. As a large organization in the public sector, we do have complex legal affairs. She provides legal advice to council and staff on various matters. And she also manages any external legal counsel. We have some specialty matters that will impact the organization. We may seek outside counsel, and Jody would manage that, as well as her office oversees our real estate portfolio, our insurance program, as well as, which is one of our more considerable and growing parts of the operation, bylaw enforcement. And Jody will speak to all this next week. And then we also have a project manager, Mr. Crozier. Most of you know him. Some of you don't, but we'll certainly get to know him because you'll be seeing reports from him in the upcoming committee cycle. But the project management office undertakes research analysis and basically undertakes special initiatives for key council-driven objectives and business case development, identification of new business opportunities and other strategic matters. So you'll see Mr. Crozier's name on a lot of reports because he does have a number of reports. And Mr. Lee and I met with him today, and you will be seeing, I believe, in the upcoming committee cycle report on an update to our strategic plans. So the key assets I would suggest of our organization right now, we have a very strong and well-experienced senior management team with a strong history of cooperation between council and our senior staff members. We've got overall across the organization, I believe, a talented, resourceful, and very dedicated staff team. We have some long-term employees. We also have some new employees coming into the organization with new vision. And we continue to positively benchmark against other municipalities. And you will see benchmarking in reports throughout your term. We subscribe to a number of benchmarking services, and we're now we have a global certification for benchmarking standard. And so benchmarking is something you'll see throughout reports during the budget process. And generally, we are always benchmarking very well against our peer group, which I think we should be proud of. Some challenges that council will be facing. You will be going through a recruitment for a new CAO. You have an interim CAO to get you through that, but that will be an important recruitment for the organization. One of the challenges we are facing, and we're not alone in this, but is balancing the resources we have and the funding we have against very increasing expectations from the public, a very rapidly changing legislative landscape, and a volatile economic condition in the broader in our broader world. A challenge we're facing, and it's again we're not alone, but sustaining a high-performing staff team in the midst of a talent crisis. And we talked about this. Mr. Lee and I met with the senior management team today. We talked a lot about this. We are seeing talent shortages throughout many sectors, including the municipal sector, and we have a demographic shift impacting our workforce, which is creating vacancies and a limited pool of talent to come into those vacancies. And I think the last thing is external and internal communications and public engagement in a rapidly changing communications landscape. And I'd say 10 years ago when I started, at the back of the room there was a table full of newspaper reporters, and I don't know how long it's been since we've seen a newspaper reporter. So our public gets information in very different ways than they did when I started here 10 years ago, and that is a challenging thing for us to continue to keep up with. So our initiatives for 2023, of course, these may change, but CAO recruitment, strategic plan update, as I mentioned, automated speed enforcement is something that Mr. Crozier is working on. It is a really challenging item that we would like to see brought forward this coming year, but we are facing a lot of legislative hurdles on that. And one thing that I didn't put on this list, but it dawned on me today, we are hoping to embark on a new paramedic services base in the city of Brantford this year. Which I think council's aware of, and you'll probably be seeing some more information on that, which I think is a critically important project to make sure that our paramedic service has a permanent and appropriate home. So, Your Worship, that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions for Michael? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we will now go to 4.2.2. Heather Boyd, General Manager of Corporate Services.
Sorry, I couldn't do it with the mouse.
Sorry. Every time. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. The Corporate Services Department, we provide critical support to council, all our departments, residents, and stakeholders. We include financial services, human resources, business and technology solutions, council services, records management, and customer service. Our team, and some of whom are in attendance tonight, include Heather Mifflin, who's our Director of Finance, James Rickert, who's the Director of Business and Technology Solutions, Karen Dropko, the Director of Human Resources, who couldn't be here tonight, Helen Kennedy, the Supervisor of Information Services, who couldn't be here tonight, Alicia, our Clerk, and Heather Fair, Administrative Coordinator, who's at the back. So our finance team, they have responsibility for all things involving revenues coming into the county, expenditures, purchasing. We have purchasing bylaws, bids and tenders programs, contracts and agreements, development charges, bylaw administration. So we have that, and as we discussed at the last meeting, a bunch of changes coming forward from the new provincial legislation that will affect that. Reserve funds, investments, debentures, and debt management. They're responsible for all our banking and our financial reporting to the province, up to the province, and then also down to you as council with our variance reports and our financial statements and information out to the public. They undertake the budget every year, which we will be getting into in January. And they also manage any grants, once again, those coming down to us from the federal and provincial governments, and also those that we send out to our community organizations. Business and technology solutions. So their areas of responsibility, they have several kind of sections. So client relations, that is your help desk support. So when you get your county-owned devices, they'll be the ones that you'll call if you have any problems or need some help with the setup. And they provide that service for all our departments and our systems, so a lot of the computer systems that we run. Our business solutions group, they help with the acquisition and implementation of software so that they run with all the other software that the county has, so we're not buying one thing that makes us a mess for another part of our organization. They also provide support to the council chambers technology and virtual hybrid meetings, and that would be Gary at the back there, who we see every week pretty much. And they also do develop and manage our geographic information system, so our GIS system through the Canoe system. They operate the county drone for data collection, and they also help out with like fire emergencies and that. They've kind of developed a program for helping them and with our emergency operations. Our technology system group, so they do the installation, operation, and maintenance of the infrastructure behind the county's network. So our hard equipment, our lines, our networks, our servers, and they also are responsible for the network and system security to protect our information assets. Our human resources group, they are responsible for the recruitment, onboarding, retention, offboarding, and retirement of all the county employees. They are involved in the health and safety policy development. They run all the corporate training for the county or coordinate when it needs to come from outside sources. They undertake health and safety initiatives, including our joint health and safety committees, employee wellness, claims management like WSIB, and they do tracking and analysis of any incidents at the county. Labor relations, so contract negotiations, administration of those contracts, and dispute management. They undertake job evaluations and organizational reviews for our compensation packages, attendance management, and oversee the performance reviews and our department structures. Information services, so this is the group that's usually also referred to as records group. They are involved in the development and oversight for privacy, for records retentions, requests for information. They undertake any freedom of information requests. It came up in John Mascaren's presentation a couple weeks ago. Our supervisor of information services is the county's delegated official for the legislative purposes under the IPC. They're responsible for the retention, catalog, storing and access any county files, and destructing those when they're no longer required by retention bylaw. They implement the new electronic records filing system, and they're working on the digitization of those files. Council services, you've all become well acquainted with a lot of the functions of the council services group. Admin support to the mayor and member of councils, a number of legislative responsibilities under the Municipal Act and Municipal Elections Act. They run all the facets of the council and committee meetings and council-related policies, bylaws. They're the returning officer for the municipal and school board elections. They're responsible for vital statistics for the county, and they also help with any conference registrations and protocol matters for special events. Customer service, so these are our frontline staff. If you ever call into the county or you show up at one of the offices, they provide the front desk in-person support in Burford and Paris and reception for all the calls. They respond to all the emails at info@Brant, and also they're our live chat agents. They work with communications very closely to make sure that the messaging that they're sending out at the front desk is the corporate message that we want to portray. And they track trends and topics to help inform decisions on things that are important to the community, and they provide administrative support to the other departments. The key assets of our group, we have a team that's dedicated to providing exceptional responsive customer service. So if you talk to any of our frontline people, I think you'll find that they're always very happy to help, very willing to take whatever steps to get people the answers they need or to get people to the right person to speak to. We have a staff group with experience bringing together council, departments, external agencies, so it's all those networks, building those relationships, taking the time to understand the organization and its role in the community. And we have a balanced mix of team members. Some of us have been here many, many years. Some have been here a very short time or either come from the private sector or other organizations with different ideas and different perspectives. So it's a good balance of new and then those who have been here longer. A few challenges we always seem to come across in a corporate services group. We do provide internal efficiencies to other departments, so what we do to help them directly helps improve service levels, revenue sources, and workflows, but there's very few opportunities for corporate services to actually have its own non-tax supported revenue. So there's no user fees related to like the banking supports we provide to the county, or there's no direct user fees for a lot of the work we do. One thing is that volatile trends in the global, regional, and local economies, labor shortages, supply chain issues, healthcare system concerns, all those things that are new and current in the news, and not so new, some of them, it's going to require a real strong financial plan going forward. And I know this has come up a few times at council, and we are committed to getting one done this in the next short term. And it's going to take a strong plan with some, serious decision making to keep our county to be successful and prosperous for its residents. A few things in 2023 that we are driving forward with. The 2023 budget process begins early in the new year. Ongoing council orientation and training programs. We've got a whole bunch of other things scheduled to be presented over the next few months. Finalizing a few outstanding components of the asset management plan. That's a coordinated group across the organization, so it may come up in a few other presentations tonight. Completion of the long-term financial plan, which I just spoke to. A review of the compensation benefits package. We are still committed to digitizing and providing electronic records to make all that information more easily accessed by internal departments and to the public where appropriate. And a unified communication strategy, which the intention of this is now that we're in a world of hybrid, you're meeting, you're talking on your phone, you got desk phones, office people here and there. It's intended to make it so that you can call one place and get anybody. We kind of spoke to it with the counselor stuff, so that calls can be transferred directly to whether you're on your cell phone or whether you're on your whatever device you're working off of. Also, like your text messages and your other messages, your emails, make it a little more seamless so that you're not, I want to talk to Heather, so you call the office and like, oh, let me send you through, and they get my desk phone. My desk phone tells you to call my cell phone, and then you call my cell phone. Oh, it's not me you need to talk to, so I can't transfer you to anyone. You have to call back to the office. So that's kind of some of the things we're looking to address in that unified communication strategy. Then just if you have any questions or you need any assistance, I'm always available. There is my contact information, and any of our other department groups can be contacted by reaching 44 Brant. That's it.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions for Heather? Councillor Howe is your first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Heather. Heather, my question is under the customer service part of your presentation. I just wanted to clarify. Reception for all calls to 44 Brant, responses to emails to info@Brant, and live chat agent support on the county website. Are all three of those a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 type of thing? And part of the reason why I'm asking is on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, any one of us will get a phone call from a constituent that says the fence has fallen down at the dog park out of Green Lane and the dogs are running everywhere. And it would help us to be able, if we direct them to 44 Brant or info@Brant, is it Monday morning before somebody sees that? I just wondered if you could clarify that a little bit.
At this time, most of those services are still Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. The live chat does have some after-hour service, but like Saturday morning, it wouldn't have. I know that there is some talk. There's a group of senior managers that are meeting shortly to talk about after-hours calls and how we're going to deal with those in a more comprehensive, basic understanding that we are not in a world anymore where like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 or whatever isn't quite the way people operate anymore. So that is something we are looking into, but right now, yes, that is still the way that is.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have an after-hour service though, which is handled by fire dispatch. So if you, it's my understanding, it's been a while since I've had to deal with this, but if you call into one of our services after hours, it'll say if this is an emergency or if you need immediate assistance, please stay on the line, and it will transfer over to fire dispatch, and then we have a on-call system for that kind of stuff. So.
Councillor House.
Okay, thank you. And maybe through our communications group, we could kind of tighten up a little bit the way for the public to access that process. Because I'm not sure most people understand that.
We can look into that, sure.
Thanks.
Councillor Miller, you're next.
Thank you. One quick question, one maybe not so quick. First one, employee appreciation. Are we going to see that event come back under your human resources branch?
Yeah, we had hoped to bring that back this year, and once again, it was just kind of I think it's one of those things. Every time we thought we could bring it back, and then something would happen, and we had to pull it back again. So, I mean, we are certainly hoping to schedule something for 2023, and we're hoping to schedule something maybe a little more all-inclusive to kind of capture, recognizing that we haven't done such a program in a few years.
Okay, I always thought it was a good event, and I'm supportive of it. You talked about retention and all that. I'm sure it doesn't hurt. Second question: when somebody calls in, I remember Michael's predecessor talking about this, and I don't know where we've left it. But as far as somebody calls in, they contact or email. Do we have a timeline that we should respond to them by, or?
We did establish a corporate customer service strategy of 24 hours that they should be getting a response within.
Okay.
Obviously, most of our departments and groups exceed that and get it much quicker than that. But 24 hours is kind of the corporate standard we set.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Heather? Councillor Chambers?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a general question, Heather. In the Municipal Act, it says one of the roles of council is to maintain the financial integrity of the municipality. In the olden days, we used to have finance committees and audit committees. We used to have the check register presented and approved. And in the olden days, and I think Heather and Daryl would probably remember this, we even actually had invoices brought to the committee meetings to look over to make sure everything was okay. Those days are long gone, thank God. And I'm just wondering, in today's modern municipality, what should council do to maintain the financial integrity of the municipality, whatever that means?
I think a big part of that, as we do it now, is the audit and the financial statements that come through. And one of the commitments we're trying to make in 2023 is to get those much earlier in the year to council, so that you have some idea of, that the county is maintaining its financial. The other piece is the variance reports, and we talked a few months ago about making those a little more robust in terms of, some of the delegated authority and some of the big purchases that have been made, so that councillors have a better understanding of, the big money that's been spent. And then other than that is, the approvals, the delegation of authorities, is just reviewing, the money that you spend and the budgets that we go through each year. And when we look at the budgets and the variances and our money at the end, surpluses or deficits, those are kind of the tools that we use currently.
And I think we're all looking forward to the financial plan that's coming forward.
Yep.
Any other questions for Heather? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll move on to 4.2.3, which is Pam Dusling, and she's the General Manager of Development Services. Whose job gets harder by the minute.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, good evening. I'll start again. It's my privilege to provide you an overview of the Development Services Department on behalf of our team. Our management team will be here next week as we're going to do some training and education in much more detail. But this evening, I will provide you an overview of the 5 W's of Development Services. So I'll talk about who Development Services is, what we do, where we are located, why we have Development Services in the County of Brant, and when and how to contact us. So to begin, who is Development Services and what do we do? Well, Development Services consists of 4 different divisions. First and foremost, the Policy Planning Division, the Development Planning Division, the Development Engineering Division, and the Building Division. And overall, we are responsible for growth, development, and building in the County of Brant. And our management team consists of myself. I'm Pam. I'm the General Manager of Development Services, and I basically help the rest of our team and organize our undertakings, and I'm fiscally responsible for our department. Our Manager of Policy Planning is Ms. Jennifer Boyer. Our Director of Development Planning is Mr. Matt Vaughn. Our Director of Development Engineering is Mr. Don Cunningham, and our Chief Building Official is Mr. Richard Wiedhaus. And the glue that holds us all together is our administrative assistant, Nicole Campbell, who's currently on maternity leave this year. So we have the privilege of working with Pam Klinger-Smith, who's joined our team. Now, good development is the result of great policy, and our policy planning team is an extremely important part of the overall development process in the County of Brant. And this dynamic team includes a team of 3 planners, one which is a senior environmental planner, and again, they're overseen by Jennifer Boyer. And the policy planning division is responsible for long-range planning projects, like the new draft official plan, and once completed, a new comprehensive zoning bylaw. They're also, they coordinate special projects, such as the parking study that's been requested by Council, St. George interim control bylaw, and the archaeological management plan this year. This team also undertakes policy initiatives such as source water protection, heritage conservation, and affordable housing projects. And I should note that this team initiated the first Habitat for Humanity build in the County of Brant this past year, which was very exciting. And finally, this team is essential currently in monitoring and implementing ongoing provincial legislation changes, such as Bill 109 and Bill 23, which we will discuss more later next week. Our development planning team consists of 6 planners, 3 who are currently on leave, GIS analyst, and our planning administrative assistant and secretary treasurer to the Committee of Adjustment. And this dynamic team is overseen by Matt Vaughn, and you'll get to know all the planners very, very well, as you will see them at Planning and Development Committee meetings once a month. And their role is primarily to coordinate and provide recommendations on all development applications to the County of Brant Council. And this team meets also once a month with our Committee of Adjustment and provides recommendations on consents, minor variances, and fence and sign variances. We do circulate these decisions to Council for information in Friday files. And then, of course, all official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, subdivisions, condominiums, as well as part lot control, which is a process to regulate further division of lots and blocks within a subdivision. And cell tower applications are going forward to this Council for decision. Matt Vaughn and myself do have delegated authority to approve site plan control applications, which is a planning tool that municipalities use to evaluate certain design site elements of a proposal, such as sidewalks, parking, lighting, and garbage. And the development team also responds to many, many development inquiries from developers, residents, real estate agents, and more. And finally, this team acts as expert witnesses at the Ontario Land Tribunal. So one thing I do want to stress about the development team is that these planners make recommendations to you as Council, and these recommendations are based on current provincial and municipal policy frameworks, their education, their training, their expertise, and best planning principles. But it is ultimately the Committee of Adjustment for minor applications and yourselves as Council that make decisions on the development for the County of Brant. So you might be wondering how many development applications the Development Services Team Department is undertaking, and the following is just a quick snapshot of planning application statistics over the last 4 years. So the red numbers are those that come before Council, and this year they are currently totaling around 55 applications, which is on average about 5 decisions a planning and development committee meeting. However, most of these applications do come forward to council twice, once for information purposes and then once for the decision. And the Committee of Adjustment sees around 100 or 120 applications a year, as outlined in blue near the bottom. And the green numbers are pre-consultation applications and site plan control applications, which staff undertake at around 60 or 70 a year. So as you can see, the overall development applications have been increasing significantly in the County of Brant over the last 4 years, respectively. A key part of the development process is development engineering, which is housed in development services. And this team of technologists and technicians review all current development applications and engineering drawings for things like stormwater, sanitary, water, traffic, and lot grading. And this is our very highly technical specialized team. This team is directed by Mr. Don Cunningham, who's been with the county for some 30 years and has a great deal of experience in development history. His team has 2 branches, development engineering, who again reviews all the development applications, and then field services, who undertake lot grading review before each building permit and ensures that development works are constructed and completed in a timely and orderly fashion in the field, and keep those developing in the County of Brant responsible for their development agreements and requirements. So field services also administers and permits all site alteration on properties, which is the general movement of any material on site. And just like the planners, this team has a very heavy workload and a lot of responsibility. And then finally, the building division is overseen by our chief building official again, Richard Wiedhaus, and his right-hand man is Deputy Chief Building Official Adam Rosenberg. And these 2 gentlemen hold a lot of responsibility in ensuring that the people that live, work, and play in the County of Brant are safe in and around buildings and structures. So this team includes 3 keen administrative staff, 3 plans examiners, and 1 senior examiner who is focused on Part 3 reviews, which is large building, and then 6 building inspectors. And if you're wondering how many building permits this team processes a year, the answer is about 1,000 a year. So this 2022 year, this team has administered, reviewed, and safely permitted approximately 1 home a day, as the number of residential units as of November 1st this year was 352. So the new residential homes and existing home renovations and additions continue to be our most highly business, accounted for about 80% of our permit activity. However, we have seen an increase in new farm, commercial, and industrial construction, with more large-scale projects coming to the county, and construction value has doubled in the areas, in these areas, approximately $25 million in annual value to over $50 million in the last 2 years. And this basically concludes who Development Services is and what we do. Now, there's much more complexity to our process and our current policy regime, but I will be taking an opportunity again to provide more detailed information in December, but at least you know who we are and what we do for now. So Development Services is located right here in the Paris Customer Service Office. Our building division is on the main floor with customer service at the front counter, and our policy planning, development planning, and development engineering are all located upstairs in the Paris office here. Development Services is truly a hybrid working team, and we conduct business from the front counter, talking to customers in our Paris office, in our home offices, on building sites, and we tend to have a lot of meetings. Mostly hybrid, as our developers and builders are busy and prefer zooming into meetings now. So why is Development Services important? Well, we build your community. We ensure that there are heritage, that there are natural areas, parks, transportation networks, and overall safe and responsible development. And we also work with all of our colleagues in all of the departments to build and serve the county. And on that note, if you need to get a hold of Development Services, please feel free to direct all your questions and inquiries to myself, and I will coordinate with the appropriate person in our department. And on behalf of the department, we look forward to building the county with you.
Thanks, Pam. Are there any questions for Pam, noting that we are going to get a more detailed report next week? See none. Thanks, Pam. Cindy Stevenson, General Manager of Community and Protective Services.
Good evening. I'm here this evening to present on behalf of Community Protective Services. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to provide an overview of our department. The Community Protective Services Department provides both essential and highly valued services to the community with significant interaction with our residents and customers. Our divisions include recreation facilities, parks and recreation, fire services, and emergency management. So this slide shows our leadership team. Darren Watson is our acting fire chief. Stacy Ellens, our director of parks and recreation. Kathy Ballantyne, director of facilities and special projects. Joanne DaCosta is our administrative coordinator. Kent Potroff, our community emergency management coordinator. And Leslie Jackson is a project manager for our department. So first I'll touch on our administrative team. Our administrative team provides strategic guidance, leadership, and support for the department on our strategic and special projects. It is supported by Joanne DaCosta, as I mentioned, who provides support directly for myself, all members of our team, and is also providing support on an interim basis for our CAO. Leslie Jackson, our project manager, is involved in coordinating and supporting various department initiatives, including policy updates and development, implementation of our master plan recommendations, updates to council on progress of department initiatives, and she also has quite a few successful applications and coordination of various grants for our department. So our recreational facilities division, as mentioned, our director is Kathy Ballantyne, and this division oversees operation of our recreational community centers. We also collaborate with our volunteer management groups and community partners to manage and maintain our community halls and lawn bowling facilities. We provide department customer service and public facility bookings of 72 rental spaces, and that includes everything from meeting rooms, halls, ice, turf, gym, our soccer fields, all of our outdoor spaces, amphitheater, and pool. The operations staff within this division provide maintenance of our parks throughout the county, and we currently have 54 and continue to grow on that number. And this division also oversees new community facility construction and facility retrofits within the recreation area. And so this slide here just shows one of the projects that are currently underway, our new Painesville Community Center, which is scheduled to be completed early in the new year, as well as our Brant Sports Complex customer service desk. And that is also going to see a retrofit in the new year to optimize space, safety, and service there. Our Parks and Recreation Division, as mentioned, our director is Stacy Ellens, and this area has undergone some restructuring this year to support growth within community services and address capacity challenges as the community grows. Parks has shifted to this division earlier this year. It includes cemetery operations across the county, direct oversight for Paris Parks operations currently, as well as new parks and trails development. Forestry services, which is new, and we created a new position earlier this year and just had a new forestry technician start with the county, so we're just starting to develop that program. It also includes recreation programming, so camps, after-school fitness, various programs for all ages. It also includes oversight for the Paris Community Pool and Russell Heights Operation and Management. Russell Heights is the Seniors Affordable Housing Complex in St. George. And we have a section on community development as well. So this area oversees implementation of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, the Age-Friendly Community Plan, is involved in volunteer management programs, and liaises with city social services to ensure support and coordination with the city on service to county residents. And this just a couple of pictures there from our camp programs from this summer. Our camp programs are in high demand. The demand for those just continue to grow as our community grows. So for fire services, Darren Watson is our acting fire chief, and the county currently has 8 fire stations located throughout the municipality. Council did approve a 9th station at the north end of Paris. We've selected a site and we'll start to proceed with developing plans for that site early in the new year. This service includes the administration group. So there is support for training for all of our personnel, policy development, station support, recruitment of new volunteers, and asset management for fleet, equipment, and facilities. Another area is our fire suppression and rescue, and this is really built on the contingent of our 195 volunteer firefighters, which are stationed across the current 8 stations. It also includes fire prevention and public education. Our fire prevention officers conduct inspections, fire investigations, as well as education with schools and other facilities across the county. Our communications and dispatch group, which was mentioned earlier, they do provide fire dispatch services as well as after-hour service for the municipality. And our fire chief is the municipality's alternate community emergency management coordinator. So these pictures just show one of the new trucks that council approved last year for the Paris station, as well as a contingent of quite a few of our new recruits from the last recruit class who had a controlled burn last year in order to practice their skills. Emergency management, we have a part-time community emergency management coordinator, Ken Pottruff, and he provides oversight for the municipality's compliance with the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. You will notice when you get into this field, there are a lot of acronyms, so we try to stay away from that, but the Emergency Management Development Plan is developed annually, and it includes objectives that the municipality strives towards for our emergency management program. It includes training as well as public education. Emergency management, Kent also looks at our emergency management bylaw and emergency response plan and monitors whether or not we need to make adjustments or changes to bring back to council for consideration. The county has an emergency management program committee, and this includes senior staff of the Municipal Emergency Control Group, some key outside agencies, including the health unit and the OPP, and a member of council. And that group meets regularly to review the development plan and ensure that we are achieving our objectives. And Kent also plans our annual emergency exercise, which is required under legislation. This area provided significant support over the duration of the COVID-19 emergency and provides advice to ensure a high state of emergency readiness for the municipality. And this is a group of us at the last emergency management exercise, and this was held at our new Emergency Operations Center at the new OPP detachment. So the department is supported by a number of master plans and studies that are guiding documents for staff. All of these documents have been previously approved by council and provide direction on our initiatives as we move forward. This slide also notes a couple of upcoming plans that we'll be working on over the next year. There are other projects as well. Some I already touched on, the North Paris Fire Station that we'll be working on, the Paris Lawn Bowling Club facility. We're at the stage now where we do have a concept, so council will probably see something on that coming forward in the new year. We're also really looking forward to opening the new Canesville Community Center as well, and looking at plans for a new community center out in Glen Morris as well. Some key assets, which aren't noted on this slide, but I thought I would mention for the department. We do have a talented team of competent and capable staff who are responsive and adaptable, and this really was evident and shone through as we went through the COVID-19 emergency. Our new facility investments and retrofits, such as the 3 new fire halls, our new community center in Canesville, several new parks to meet the development in the Paris area currently, will ensure high quality service to the community and also improve staff morale and safety. And as I just noted, we have a number of comprehensive plans and studies in place to guide planning for this term of council. Some of the critical challenges, one is meeting increasing and evolving service demands as the community grows, and we see this in programming and facility requests and in responding to an increasing number of requests from customers and residents. And recruiting and retaining staffing, especially in our traditional temporary and part-time staffing roles. And this slide notes our department contact information. So if you do have a specific question or concern in one of the areas or divisions mentioned, please feel free to reach out to the appropriate director. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council to Cindy? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question through you to Cindy. Cindy, will there be an emergency management training for this term of council?
Through the mayor, yes, that is planned as part of the orientation. That will likely happen sometime in the new year, early in the new year. We just don't have a date.
I remember the last one. It was good, so good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Cindy? Seeing none. Thanks, Cindy. We'll go to 4.2.5, which is Allison Newton, General Manager of Strategic Initiatives.
Sorry, I saw that. I will be presenting on behalf of the Strategic Initiatives Department. I wanted to first of all say that this department and the divisions within it, at least as they're formatted today, have evolved into their current structure and mandate over the last 6 years. Not even 6 years for most of them. So they are really young. They're young in their format and they're young in their structure, and the plans themselves that they've been operating under for the last 5 years are now coming to an end. And there's been a lot of lessons learned over that time. So it's a great opportunity for this new council to work with staff and work with these divisions as they develop their new strategic plans. They renew their guided work over the next council term, and it'll no doubt further evolve their scope of services. I'll speak a little bit more to that later in the presentation. So the department structure is economic development and tourism. That includes arts, culture, and heritage, and special events and filming. The communications and public relations division, public transportation and accessibility services, and also the development liaison, which reports directly into the general manager, however works closely with all the other divisions and other departments as well. Here is the reporting structure. Danny Toda is our strategic initiatives coordinator. You we'll definitely hear from her if you haven't already. And she really manages all the administration for the department. Russell Prost, who's the Director of Economic Development and Tourism. It says open role, but that's Sheena Yarrick Schneider, who is currently on maternity leave. We have not backfilled her position, but Keely Wozniak, who works with her, is currently filling that position, and Danny Toda is supporting her in that. Melissa Connor, who's the Director of Corporate Communications and Public Relations. And as I mentioned, Julia Raish, who's our Development Liaison and reports directly to me. So the Economic Development and Tourism Division, in a broad sense, this division is responsible for investment readiness and business growth and expansion. This includes compilation and analysis of market data, regional and provincial partnership initiatives, policy recommendations, and business support. Part of that, and it was alluded to earlier as far as benchmarking, is the WCCD, which is the World Council for City Data. We've been part of that for 3 years now. It's been led through our department, and we have received platinum certification each of those years, and that's really a testament to staff across the corporation, not just in this department. But we will be doing training at a later date also on the data portal, how you can access that, and how you can actually use that data as well. As mentioned, the Development Liaison reports into the General Manager. However, it works very closely with the Economic Development and Tourism Division. This position was created in 2019, and it's responsible for helping businesses navigate the development process, achieve their timelines, troubleshooting issues, and being the conduit between businesses and our planning team. They're also responsible for the development, support, and marketing of tourism assets, special events, and filming. The recently completed filming and digital media strategy will help inform recommendations to the special events process, which will come forward for consideration early in the new year. Significant market shifts often impact these initiatives, particularly for this division, but throughout the corporation. And we've noticed the last year demonstrating the need for a renewed strategy and an action plan. Brant has continued to realize significant growth, and the public sentiment will also need to be considered as priorities are determined. Arts, culture, and heritage is an area that has a lot of room to grow, I believe, and I believe there's a lot of public appetite for that. Currently, there's one staff person devoted to this area, and they'll be leading the development of an arts, culture, and heritage master plan, which will also begin early in 2023. So corporate communications and public relations. This has evolved quite quickly over the last 5 years. It's been growing, I believe, every year since it was formed. Currently, the staff lead all the corporate-wide communication platforms and handle media relations. All the marketing, graphic design, digital, print, and video collateral is produced in-house, and they lead our public engagement platform, Engage Brant. The quality, consistency, and professionalism of our communications has grown significantly through this division, and they've now completed all aspects of their initial 4-year plan. We'll begin working on a new strategy in 2023. The team is largely at capacity, and council will see 2 decision packages associated with this group for budget deliberations. Public transportation and accessibility services, I know that they don't seem to go together, and there's a long history of why they do, which I won't go into, but I'll speak to them separately for now. Accessibility staff work as both an internal and public resource to interpret and apply legislation under the AODA. That's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. They promote inclusion in the community through education and public events. An excellent example of this, if you haven't seen it, is the Myth River Sensory Trail, which was completed in 2020. Staff look forward to adding new elements to the trail in the future and to expand elements of the initiative throughout the community. Our hope is for this to be a key aspect of the downtown master plan as it evolves into its detailed design. Staff look forward to expanding this division. A diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy will also begin in 2023 to guide the corporation on policy and new initiatives throughout the county. Brant Transit is our public transportation system. You may also know it as E-Ride, which is how it was launched. Our internal staff manage the contract with our service provider, provide information and education on microtransit, and mediate service concerns. Brant Transit launched, or E-Ride at that time, in early 2020, which was unfortunate as it coincided with the onset of the pandemic. So we're just getting now into getting real data on the service, how people like to use it, and really almost relaunching it into the public with a communications campaign. We will be looking at it through 2023, seeing how the service can be expanded and adapted to grow with the county's population and their evolving needs. I think you'll hear some repetitiveness in this, but we do have great staff, dedicated and stable staff. We have exceptional municipal assets, positioning the county for continued and increased investment and market success. We have an excellent team culture that nurtures collaboration and responsiveness. And the department is now becoming more stabilized after substantial changes in recent years. And we're able to now to provide efficient and progressive services to our community. Again, I think you'll hear a theme with a lot of these, but maintaining and retaining employees dealing with workload increases and a competitive environment is a challenge. Rapid shifts in public sentiment surrounding growth and changing demographics. Small team structures that can be significantly impacted by absences. Managing growth in a responsible and fiscally balanced manner, and rising demands on service being managed with limited resources. I mentioned some of these already through my presentation, but it will be a busy year. So what we will be starting and completed terms of reference for most are a new economic development and tourism strategy, communications and marketing strategy, an arts, culture, and heritage master plan, diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and renewal of our special events and filming strategy. Some of these will be done in-house, and we hope to have all of you involved in the consultation for that and get your inputs. We look forward to that. That's my whole presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions for Allison? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Allison. Just a quick one. I just wanted to confirm our Arts, Culture, and Heritage Officer falls under the Division of Economic Development and Tourism. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Chambers, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. Everybody knows that municipalities always try to retain business and attract business for obvious reasons, and everybody would agree that that's a good thing to do, except if it's in your neighborhood. I'm just wondering, Brent approach that they want to attract business private lands rather than municipally owned lands. And that puts us in competition with places like Brantford and Woodstock and Tilsonburg, Esther, and just about everywhere else that has industrial subdivisions just waiting for these industries to go in, or businesses. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on how Brant is doing with attracting businesses and what they do or to compete with publicly owned development areas opposed to private owned development areas. And when you answer, lift the thing up so you a little bit better.
I'm not sure I know how to lift it up. There we go. Okay. Thank you, through your worship. So it's a complex question, but I'll try to sort of touch on the highlights of it. So you're correct in that we have taken that approach, really so that we're not competing with the private sector. At least historically, most municipalities who have taken the approach, and it's what Brant did really with the 403 Business Park, is to be the catalyst to start investment in the community in an otherwise stagnant market, or a market that may be stalled for various reasons, whether that be servicing or whatever it may be. We're now in a very aggressive market, so we have taken the approach that development is happening on private lands, so we have not intervened. That being said, there are other reasons you may want to do that. One of them being if there's a specific sector that you may want to attract, and that's typically going to be sort of clustered around post-secondary institutions. So you'll see business parks or research parks surrounding a university or college. That's part of what we're really looking at with Conestoga, with the training program that we started around the airport. So there's certainly reasons why you still may want to have publicly owned land, but right now we are very competitive. I think the biggest challenge for the county is going to be how we control what type of development we want to see and the size and the pace of it, given the aggressiveness of the market and the types of sectors that are requiring this expansion quite aggressively. We've seen that with warehousing and logistics, which are very much required, but they're not necessarily desired in every place, and certainly not at the magnitude that we're seeing in the county. So it's a matter of how we want to balance that going forward, and there's different mechanisms you can use, but certainly owning public land could be one of the strategies that you employ.
Councilor Chambers?
And just to follow up, one of the problems that's associated with developing on private lands, although we have designated lands for employment in the official plan, most of the land is designated or is zoned agriculture. And for companies to come in to Brant County, they have to run the gauntlet of getting a zoning change and the wrath of all the neighbors within 10 miles that don't want this in their neighborhood. In light of some of the changes in the provincial regime, the regime of planning, that they're trying to make it easier for developers to develop. I'm just wondering if you see that enhancing the opportunity to attract business into the county, or is it going to matter at all, or how do you see that happening?
Through through the CAO, it does provide opportunities, I think, and I think it doesn't have to be one or the other necessarily. It could be a hybrid approach. So I think there is an opportunity for more partnerships, which typically provide a better outcome for everyone involved if we can cooperate with different stakeholders in the community, and I think that's going to be something that we're certainly going to want to bring forward as a stronger option and new strategy for economic development, subject to public consultation, obviously, and we'd want to go through that in finer detail. But I think that's where probably most of our future opportunities are going to lie, is in some hybrid approach to those two options.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Thank you. Alison, one thing I didn't see on your list of critical challenges was the Paris Downtown Master Plan. I presume your group still owns that and is responsible for seeing it through to completion.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. This time.
Thank you all for not standing up.
We do still own that. However, we are going to be working very closely with Rob Walton's group on the detailed design. As you know, it goes into the Grand River EA work that they've done and the further construction that will happen. But we do, I think it's critical given the time and given all the changes that we've seen to have a really robust public consultation on that detailed design. There's a lot of things that have changed, and we want to be responsive to that. But I think really the substantive points in that strategy are still valid, in that we want to make it more accessible for everyone in the community. We want to make it more inclusive for everyone in the community. Just the mechanisms to do that might look a little different today than they did 4 years ago.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Mayor, Alison, I think you and I have talked about this before. Since we brought forward the master plan, I think it was 2019, so it's quite some time away now. Things have changed. We've relocated the new main library to out of town, effectively out of the downtown. We started to see some of the bigger vendors here think about moving to centres of population. So, for example, Home Hardware are going to move out to the south end of town. And I am concerned that we keep a strong focus on keeping the centre of town vital. And it's not just Paris, but every town that we have, every smaller community, we need to make sure that we have vital centres. So I look forward to seeing that in your list of critical challenges for this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Alison. Alison, you got some real jewels in your department as far as employees go, and in a smaller department, I guess it's harder when one of them takes a leave of absence or leaves. So, how do you deal with it? And I don't want to single one out, but I will. Sheena. I known Sheena for a while, and I thought she's done a bang-up job with accessibility. She's working on the Brant E-Ride. How do you deal with it when someone like that leaves or takes a leave?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. So that was a really tough one, and part of that was self-inflicted in that we had a very strange hybrid position with Sheena, with the public transportation and the accessibility. When she went on maternity leave, we were quite certain that we weren't going to recruit another person with that, combined skill set. So that's something I think we need to look at really in all the divisions within the department is just the corporate continuity. We've been very fortunate in that it's a close team. They work really well together. Been very lucky that way. So they've been willing to pitch in and really make up some of the difference, but it's still a gap. And I think that again, as a corporation, I need to really look at that as far as the department goes and make sure that we aren't creating risk for the corporation in the sense of having a big gap if somebody leaves.
Okay, thank you, and we'll try and get that employee appreciation night back again too. So.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Alison? Seeing none, thank you. We'll move on to 4.2.6. Mr. Rob Walton, General Manager of Operations.
Wow, learned something new tonight. So it's a pleasure to be here to present on behalf of Council Training for the Operations Department. So we're at 24/7 operation, and that includes our capital property, environmental services, which is solid waste, stormwater, water, wastewater, and water, infrastructure services, roads and fleet, and our operations administration. Here's the org chart, and everyone's here tonight. We have Heather Fair here, who is our administrative coordinator, who actually has the pleasure of working for both myself and Heather Boyd. Way to go, Heather. Mark Eby, the Director of Infrastructure Services. Sean McAfee, Capital Property Manager. Greg Demers, Director of Roads and Fleet. And Alex Davidson, who's actually Zooming in tonight, but he is here and has been, I know he's been paying attention throughout the presentations for, because he's been texting me. So I'll just go through a little bit of what each of the departments or sections encompasses. So start out with environmental services and solid waste. So that's county waste management services, garbage, got cut off here for some reason, Paris Transfer Station and Biggers Lane Landfill. Our garbage collection and recycling is done by a contractor, and that's Amterra. That contract goes until actually to the end of the funding of the program by the province in 2025. And then there'll be some transition happen then, so this term of council will be looking at that. And our landfill operations is also by contract with Future Waste. Wastewater and stormwater. We have wastewater collections, treatments, and treatment systems in St. George, the airport, Cairnsville, and Paris. And the Ontario Clean Water Agency, or AQUA, is the acronym, is our contractor for wastewater treatment operations and the pumping stations. And this group, this is a new thing for this group. We've put stormwater management ponds and storm sewers under their jurisdiction as well within the last year. Oops. Shoot. How do we get to go back on this thing? There we go. Water. Environmental Services also has the Water Division. This is one that council needs to pay particular attention to, because under the Safe Drinking Water Act, there's such a thing as the statutory standard of care, which means that decisions made on water that council can be personally held responsible for. And there will be some training on that in the upcoming training regime for council. So there are 5 water systems. And this division also takes care of all our rural water systems for our sports facilities, libraries, and community centers that aren't on municipal water. And there are 2 bulk water fill stations so that people that don't have other sources of water and need water at times, and in the area down in particular around Onondaga and down in that area, there are people that cannot get good wells down there and depend on this for their water supply. So that's very important that we have those available, and it's a card lock system, I believe, that you can get at it when you need it. Capital Properties operate and maintain all the county facilities except the parks. Parks are by Cindy's group. We take care of the rest, and we actually work with parks too on certain projects too. So I think it's a good interaction there. Capital Properties, they construct a lot of small capital projects. They undertook all of the renovations in this newly renovated facility. Took a little bit of advantage of it not being used during the pandemic and did that, so that worked out really well. And new in the last recent period of time, and for next year's budget, we're going to manage all the county furniture budget through them and get some efficiencies out of that. Infrastructure Services basically does the capital works program. Administers construction and assists with the construction of new facilities. And one very important thing that they do is they manage our operations asset management data in the GIS system, and this is all part of the asset management program, which we're working very hard on bringing up to date. Roads, a lot of stuff here. Winter control, summer operations. Although Environmental Services manages the storm sewers, Roads actually does a lot of the work on them, so cleaning catch basins and working on broken pipes and the like. They operate our gravel pits. They do some smaller county road construction projects, the ones that aren't undertaken by Infrastructure Services. They do manage the fleet, and over the last about 3 years, I think, we've been migrating towards a county fleet system where we're managing it as a fleet, not department by department. And that gives us a lot of efficiencies. We can trade equipment to where it's needed to be. We can use vehicles that have been in a certain use in other uses to make it more efficient for the county. I think we're seeing a lot of efficiencies out of that. We also have added mechanics and are doing a little bit more of our in-house work on it. But we do a combination of in-house work and using exterior services as well. Minimum maintenance standards is the regime that we run under for operation of roads, particularly winter maintenance. And they do all the data management for that, which doesn't always keep us out of court, but it usually does us quite well if we ever happen to make it there. They operate the 4 patrol yards for roads. Brant Safe Streets, they do most of the work associated with that. And I think in our training we'll talk a little bit more about that. And they also manage the municipal drain maintenance program. We do have a contract drainage superintendent, Shannon Tweedle, who's works actually for RJ Burnside Associates, but she's been with us close to a year now. Almost 2 years, holy smokes. And I think that council's seen there's been a lot more action on municipal drains and responsiveness to the requests. And under roads and under infrastructure services, both Greg Demers and Mark Eby work as flood management coordinators for the county as well, and work with Kent Potriff on issues with that. Also with the city, there's a lot of interaction with between the county and the city of Brantford on that, because obviously one of the big flood issues is the Grand River. So operations admin, a very important part of our operations, administrative support for our department as well as for corporate services, do the customer service for waste management, water inquiries, road inquiries, processing permits, oversized permits, locates, and they facilitate our operations development review process. And one thing I'll say to council is I've worked very hard on this since I've been here to make sure that on development, we've got development services under Pam, which is doing all of the major review of developments, but we're getting our operational comments into, because it isn't all just the technical stuff that's written in the books. It's the stuff that affects our roads and other services from a particular point of view of our operations. It's very important to get into that. We've worked very hard on getting that into the comments and making sure that these developments meet what we need to have in Brant County. So key assets, I think we do very good customer service, got a strong staff complement, good work plan for delivery of new infrastructure, and I think we do have quite a good working relationship with external agencies in the government. Critical challenges, providing infrastructure ahead of the growth. That's been tough. A project like Rest Acres Road is in pretty good shape now, but would have been nice if it was there a couple of years ahead of when it was. Getting our asset management plan completed and managing those aging assets, making use of efficient use of our county resources, and succession planning. And I wrote one down here that isn't on there. Retention of frontline workers really in the last couple of years has been a very big challenge. Bringing workers into jobs like winter maintenance when we have to hire extra work has been very tough. And we're competing with other industries in the trucking and transportation where they pay large amounts of money. They can't get drivers either, so it's been very very challenging. There's a lot of best management and strategic initiatives that we have. We use class environmental assessments. Canesville and Burford are 2 examples of that. We're going to do some council training on Class EAs. Drinking water quality management standard. You will see a report at the December operations and admin meeting where we have our regular reports to council as to what's going on with the water systems, and that's all part of the standard of care, getting information to council. I already mentioned minimum maintenance standards for roads. Inspection of bridges is required under legislation to be done in a 2-year period. So, and that is well undertaken, and you'll see lots of work going on bridges that comes out of that. And then asset management, which in this next year, you're going to see the new asset management plan come to council. Got the next couple of slides there with contact information, and One thing I do want to talk just a little bit about is how to contact Public Works for what you need to know. So you've got the contact information there. I'd prefer if council actually either contacted through myself or the directors for inquiries. We can manage then the lower level staff as to where their priorities are and get them involved. And after there's an issue going, obviously there can be interaction there, but if you can make the initial inquiries through us, that'd be great. After hours, we have through the main switchboard, we do have the 24/7 emergency line. We also have a system which council approved in a decision package last year, where we have one of our managers or managers, directors in operations is always on call, and it's a 5-person rotation amongst that group that you saw on the org chart. We will respond to things that come to us after hours and on weekends. And you don't need to know who that is, because if you or somebody contacts the 24/7 line for something, they will contact us. And we're working on a simple email system here where you just contact the email, and then the person will then get that email, and then they'll respond to it. You don't need to know who it is. So we don't have that quite in place yet, but what we're going to do is we're going to do a Friday file on that quite soon when that's in place. So you're going to see that really soon. And I think this will streamline. What we want to get away from is if you don't just quite know who it is, you send that email to 5 people, and maybe sometimes nobody realizes who should maybe deal with it, and sometimes everybody realizes who should deal with it, and they all deal with it. And we want to streamline that as much as we can and make our operations efficient. And us having the person that's on call really streamlines that, because one person knows they've got to do it, and it's a week at a time that they're on call. Then we also know the on-call system to get a hold of whoever else we need to, and we'll do that when we get involved. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Rob? Councillor Howes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Rob. I really appreciated that last part of your presentation, because of all the general managers that we have, you're the one that got the most after hours emails from me in the last 4 years, at least until I got to know Greg Demers. Truthfully, it's important, because we end up sometimes being the concierge between, we get Facebook messages and phone calls and people knocking on our doors sometimes to say, hey, the construction fence has been knocked down at Market Street, or hey, my garbage got missed, or I think my street's been missed by the snowplow. And so what you're suggesting will be a future and soon endeavor to the one centralized, if we say to people, email publicworks@brant.ca or whatever it is, then it goes to the right people. Then it takes us out of the chasing down the right people, which is good. Currently, you mentioned the 24/7 emergency line. So currently, any of those inquiries I just mentioned, if they dial 44 Brant, even if it's 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, it goes to the right person. So that's correct, right? And that's a good thing for especially our new counselors to know. That's all, I think, really moving in the right direction, and I'm appreciative of it. My second point or question is, one of the things that we get asked, especially Paris counselors, we get asked a lot about our capacity for wastewater treatment and our capacity for fresh water. And I'm wondering if it might be possible for us to have, like on an annual basis, kind of a dashboard report that we can have that information to be able to share, because we do get asked. And especially, you said right in your thing, one of your critical objectives is to stay ahead of the infrastructure, staying ahead of the development, which is a challenge. And a lot of people within the public recognize that that's a challenge, and when they see proposals for hundreds of more houses in such and such a location and whatever, they express those concerns to us.
Through the mayor, thanks for the question. And if you'll remember, back in I think in like about March or April last year, or of this year, we actually did a report to council with the protocol for allocation of development for Paris initially, and we're going to do that for all of the centers eventually. The graphs you saw out of our dashboard, I don't think that we have them on the website yet, but the intention is for us to actually put those on the website, so you can actually see here's the capacity of the system, and here's where we can put out for water, and here's where we're actually at, and here's where sort of development is, and what we can see from that dashboard is that there is more development proposed right now than the eventual capacity of the system, but that's only if they are all over full, which is going to happen over a longer period of time. That report actually talked then about how allocation was going to happen as these things register. We'll never register plans such that we'll go over capacity.
Thank you. I mean, that would be fabulous for that to be in a public-facing, simplified graph form that anybody could look at anytime, and it's more or less kept up to date. That I think the terrific solution. Thank you.
Any other questions for Rob? Councillor Kyle.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Rob. I'm just wondering, as someone who has a lot of constituents on some border roads, can you speak to the relationship you have with, say, Oxford County? So if I have constituents that are calling and asking about snow fence, that has to go on the Oxford side of the road to protect those on the Brant side of the road. How do I handle those with you guys?
So, and I may get Greg to actually help out with this. So we have boundary agreements with all of our neighbors. So there's sections of road that are joint roads, but it's decided through the boundary agreement who takes care of them. And, I'd be hard pressed to tell you who any of them is without asking Greg, but he could tell you which every one of them is. And how many neighbors do we have? Is it 7? 7 neighbors. And I think our agreements are all up to date except one, which will be coming back to council eventually. So any inquiries you get, you can make them through us, and then we can help out as to whether we're going to do it or whether we'll contact them. We won't ever push anybody into you contact them. We'll contact them if there is an issue that we know of.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Rob. Again, your department, you have some gems in there too, employees. And I'm always going to email Matt Don if somebody calls me about their blue box not getting picked up, because he always responds like that, whether even if he's on holidays. But the front, it bothers me a little bit that we're having trouble retaining them. To me, those are workers that are easy to maybe overlook and underappreciate until such time as we have a major windstorm or a bunch of flooding, and then I find we really appreciate the work they do. So no question there, but look after them, that's all.
Any other questions for Rob? Seeing none, thank you, Rob. So that's the excuse me, that's the end of the staff reports. So at this point, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everyone for all the hard work that they've done for the last term of council, getting us through some very unusual times. I think we came out on the other side looking pretty good, and it's not because of us, it's because of you people. So thank you for all you do. And with that, I'll call on Councillor Oakley, please.
4.2 Senior Management Team Departmental Presentations, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, that the Senior Management Team Departmental Presentations be received as information.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, which takes us to number 5 on the agenda, which is a resolution, 5.1. Councillor Miller.
Mayor, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor House. The procedural bylaw lays out the process for the election of chair and vice chair for the standing committees. Whereas the procedural bylaw states that each standing committee shall recommend a chair and vice chair for approval of council, whereas there are a large number of planning applications scheduled to be considered by the Planning and Development Committee in December. It is not in the best interest of the county for Brant for a chair to be appointed at that meeting, that Section 94 of the procedural bylaw be suspended and that the election of the chair and vice chair of the Planning and Development Committee occur at the November 29th, 2022 council meeting.
Does anyone want to speak to that before we call the vote? Seeing no questions, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. which takes us into an election. Are there anyone that want to put their name forward for the chair? Councillor Bell?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Chambers if he's willing to accept that nomination.
Councillor Chambers, are you prepared to take that on?
I will.
Are there any other nominations for chair?
Said that something else can come there.
Seeing
I will.
Councillor Chambers seems paralyzed or something. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I'll move that nominations be closed.
Looking for a second. I have it in Councillor Pierce. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Looking for a vice chair, Councillor Miller.
I will nominate Councillor McAlpine.
Councillor McAlpine, will you accept vice chair?
I will accept.
Anyone else want to put their name forward or nominate anyone? Councillor Pierce?
He's telling me no.
No? Call for a motion to close the nominations. Councillor Howes and Councillor Bell, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor McAlpine. Moving on to new business, Councillor, you have something? Moving on to new business. I know that we're not supposed to do it this way. We won't do it again, I guess, but I have you down for new business, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I don't want to bust procedural bylaws, but I just wanted to point out to everybody here, and I think most of us know Jay Hitchon passed away last week. And I was shocked to see it, but Jay was a regular visitor here. Yeah. And agree with him or disagree with him, I always listen to him because he was a very, very bright man, and I will miss him. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention.
Thank you. Seeing no other new business, we'll go right on to bylaws. Councillor Chambers, you have the bylaws. You have the bylaws.
He's relishing in the planning.
I know. I know. Settle down, Councillor Chambers.
I was just seeing if there was a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council before I read them. I will move, and Councillor Howes will second, that the bylaws as listed in the agenda be read a first time.
Thank you. All those in favor of the first reading? Opposed? Carried. Second reading, if you could, Councillor Chambers.
It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that the aforementioned bylaws be read a second time and all preambles and clauses be adopted.
Are there any questions after the second reading? Seeing none, all those in favor? And we'll call for the third reading of the bylaws, please, Councillor Chambers.
And again, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that the bylaws previously mentioned be now read a third time, passed, signed, and executed.
All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. That takes us to number 8, with the last thing on the agenda, which is the next meeting will be December the 20th at 6 o'clock. Seems like a long way away. And I know I don't have to ask for someone to adjourn the meeting. I'm looking for Councillor Coleman to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.